Road up towards the N1 highway. Two major truck crashes, both having an obstruction both sides of the N3 between Joburg and Durban. One just south of the Volker Plaza in the Free State area, and another big one just north of the Bergville exit in KZN. And as I said, both of those scenes with traffic restrictions and traffic control measures in place on both sides. Cape Town looking busy this morning, no obstructions, but the N1 inbound from Brackenfell, the N2 from Khayelitsha, both of those highways are getting noticeably busier earlier in the morning. I'm Rob Byrne. SAFM Sunrise starts now.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 minutes after 6. Good morning. Welcome to SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. So now we know, finally, what you and I are going to be doing and talking about on the 29th of May 2024. Election Day, and yes, everybody keeps talking about how important the elections are. They are important. And I know, and I just need to say a couple of things about this, if you don't mind, if you've got a sec. The first is that it's not a public holiday yet, but I put quite a lot of money that it will be a public holiday. They always have been in the past. I'm sure the president, by the way, has the prerogative, the right to declare something a public holiday. So this time, we won't have to win a World Cup to do it. It'll be Election Day. So I'm expecting that is going to be a public holiday. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, am I registered? What happens now? How does that all work? You can still register, okay? Some people might say to you, you can't. You can, until it is proclaimed in the Government Gazette. So you still have that moment. I'm looking at people. I don't know if they're all registered or not. Are you registered, Mpho? A slight nervous nod from Mpho. Stanza's looking around. Something at the 6th floor has caught his attention and is doing something that looks very productive, frankly. No, there we go. There's the nod. He is registered to vote. Okay. If you're not registered to vote and you're thinking, I'm not going to bother. And I understand that, by the way. Like, don't get me wrong. I know, we've heard you on this. Go and register anyway. Take your 10 seconds online, and then you can change your mind later. But if you don't register, you can't change your mind. And the point of a democracy is you're allowed to change your mind. It's kind of the point of it in a way. So, please, go and register so that you can change your mind later. If you want, you don't have to do anything after that. It takes 10 seconds. Nice website, IEC, feels like that. But all of that stuff, just go and do it. And it's done. You can tell me if you've done it if you like. And of course, all the political parties say they're ready, and the IEC says they're ready, and everyone sort of gets into a gear. I kind of like the idea that we now have a target date. And I have to say, there's a bit of speculation as about when the election would be, but I think once you knew when the date of the ANC election manifesto launch was, and it's this Saturday, then you kind of knew when the election would be. You could sort of work it out. It was never going to be September or October or anything like that. It would have to be fairly soon after the ANC manifesto launch. And as we know, Moses Mabhida Stadium, where it's happening, has been a little busy lately. Anyway, so there we are. The budget today, I'm not going to throw out too many figures, just to say 15 billion rand is the sort of estimated shortfall in revenue. And I've been interested to look at what people have been saying ahead of the budget. And there are quite a few sort of organised groups, and they all say roughly the same thing. Oh, by the way, with a huge amount of legitimacy, and they have my sympathy, they all sort of say, we need more money for this and we need more money for that. And we need more money for education. We need more money for health. No argument from me on that. I completely agree. We need more money for social grants. You won't get any argument from me on that either. The problem, of course, is where will it come from? What are you going to do? And I was thinking a lot about what Professor Keith Engels said yesterday. He said if you were to increase taxes through income tax, so you would do that on richer people, which is what, I mean, there's an argument for that. It would take you probably 18 months before you got that money, so it's not quick enough. The only thing you could do quickly is raise VAT, but that also means you're increasing taxes on the poor. So what do we do? And I mean, there's certain cutbacks, I suppose. You could say, in the old days, maybe we can take money from the South African National Defence Force, but we're deploying them to the DRC, and as we heard this week, in a very dangerous situation. So we can't really do that either. I don't know, maybe we could take some money from the VIP protection budget. I don't think that's very popular. I mean, every time I bring that up, people sort of smile at me and laugh, and nothing ever happens. But surely that's got to be one of the sort of focal points of what we're looking at. Anyway, let's see what happens. So Enoch Godongwana at 2 o'clock this afternoon, he will be standing up and announcing his budget. And I'm very worried about this one point. Last year we all said this is the toughest moment for a finance minister. The year before that we said it the year before. So in 2025, we're going to say it again. We're ever going to get out of this hole. Part of the reason we're in this situation is because our economy is not growing. And Stats SA yesterday releasing economic numbers and the unemployment, the labour force survey, they call it. And basically, the figure that scares me, that keeps me awake at night, is that youth unemployment is now at 59.4%. And, we need a long period of sustained growth, sustained jobs growth, sustained all sorts of things. We need that. And I know the sort of one boom you might remember that we lived through was sort of the mid-2000s, up until around 2007, sort of there. But we need that kind of long period that we had then. And it's just, if we don't find jobs for young people, it really doesn't matter what else we do solve. I mean, it's so important. I think it's such an important thing. All right, other issues going on at the moment. We were talking about the SIU yesterday, their investigations into PRASA, into other issues as well, and into Home Affairs. And the head of the SIU, Andy Motibe, he was in Parliament. He said they have sharp teeth and they're prepared to use them to get money back for the state. Well, let's see what happens. It's a big day in Parliament. The National Assembly due to also vote on the Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe. Now, he is still waiting a court decision that he's brought at the last minute to try and stop this court process, from this parliamentary process from removing him. And can I just say, I remember as a reporter then, on a Friday afternoon, sunny day in Joburg, 16 years ago, my son, who's 14, wasn't even thought of yet. And I saw the statement from the Constitutional Court that said Judge John Hlophe had spoken to two of their judges in cases relating to then ANC leader Jacob Zuma. I remember it so clearly. It's been such a big sort of story. And here we are 16 years later, and we still don't have final confirmation of what's going to happen. Anyway, it's taken a very long time. Toko Didiza, the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Rural Development, talking about the Ingonyama Trust yesterday. In fact, she'll come on your radio in a little while and talk a bit about that. But she says, in law, the King of the AmaZulu people, King Msizulu Kazwelithini, does have the right and is able to act as chair of the Ingonyama Trust. She makes a couple of other comments about it, and we'll sort of ask her about that. And then I noticed there's more condemnation for the ship, the El Kuwait, which docked in Cape Town. And this is the ship with the 19,000 cattle on it, and they're literally it's just gross, standing, lying in their own feces. And I noticed that several Muslim groups in Cape Town have also condemned the way, because, these animals are going to the Middle East, they'll be slaughtered there, have condemned the way that these animals have been treated. And sort of asked the question, I think this is an important question, saying they come from Brazil, they could have been slaughtered according to the correct rites and rituals and processes there, and then shipped, while dead, as meat. And what I don't quite understand, does anyone know, could anyone explain it to me, please, why these animals are being moved while they're still alive? Surely it's harder, more expensive, more difficult, and the state that they're going to arrive in surely is going to affect their value. So I don't know, maybe you know more than I do as to why they're being moved. Is there something in the economics that I'm missing? Is there something else that I just have a blind spot about? Maybe you could please just explain to me what that situation is, why it is that actually they're being moved while they're alive. There's something I don't know about and it worries me a little bit. All right, good to have you along with us this morning. 086 000 2032, SMS 41391. You tweet us FM Radio and at Stephen Grootes. Send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. Put it in your to-do list today now. Go and register to vote. It's 6:15.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
Leander Maome, good morning.
Stephen, are you good?
I'm well, thank you. What do you think you and I are going to be doing on the 29th of May, 2024?
Very simple.
Yeah.
We'll be working. That's one.
Indeed.
Two, we'll have voted by
voting,
then.
yes.
But you know what? Today, I say cue a lot of chest beating, Stephen.
Yeah.
And also you can start the timer on the end of some political careers. And of course,
That's
the
a
beginning
good
of
point,
others.
actually, yes.
Yeah.
Someone-
Others just know that.
Yes,
Listen, it's
yes.
all just a facade. They know that it's over.
It's over.
Others
yeah.
know it's over.
Yeah.
You know.
And some of them have been around for a while, and some of them sort
Yeah.
of started yesterday.
Oh man, listen. For me, I'm looking forward to it, Stephen. And
Yeah.
and being part of SABC News, it's fun at these times.
No, it is.
so much fun.
Yes.
I tell you. So
You've
much
got to be
fun.
quite careful, but yes, it is fun.
Absolutely, Stephen. We definitely have to follow all the rules to make sure that we cover everyone as they come in and as they go out.
Yes.
Anyway, Stephen, in the Western Cape High Court, they'll be delivering judgment this morning in the Judge John Hlophe matter. Now, the suspended judge president took Parliament to court in Cape Town seeking an interdict against the impeachment vote against him, which is set to happen today, as you correctly reflected, Stephen. And he's not the only one who will be voted on today. It's also Judge Nkola Motata. That long-standing matter as well. You said
Yes.
16 years ago?
Yeah.
Was that not at the same time as well?
I think Judge
Motata's-
Motata was a little after that. I think.
Yes,
Just
a little after that.
yeah.
Yes, but another one long-standing, hoping for some finality there, Stephen. And also, Stephen, the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria will deliver judgment in the DA's application to have the long-standing policy of cadre deployment declared unconstitutional and unlawful. And of course, this is after they secured the release of the meeting minutes of the deployment committee. So this issue is not going away for the DA, right?
No, and I think this is, and in a way, the timing's worked out for the opposition party, because I think this is going to be one of the issues of the elections.
Oh, no, almost definitely. Almost definitely.
And it's going to be very interesting. And I mean, in some cases, things that I quoted yesterday, Barbara Hogan, for example, long-term ANC person, did an immense amount during the struggle, who sort of seemed to criticize it when she was at the Zondo Commission. So, I think there are lots of different directions this is going to move in.
Most definitely. So, as John Steenhuisen is going to be there and Leon Schreiber is going to be there, either for a victory lap or a disappointed,
Yes.
Either way, we'll be there for it, Stephen. And still in the courts, the rape trial of controversial man of the cloth, Bishop Bafana Zondo, is back in court. The founder of the Rivers of Living Waters Church is facing multiple charges of rape and trying to bribe one of his victims to drop the charges for offences said to have been committed between, listen to it, 1980s and 2018.
You had adults testifying about what he did. It's astonishing.
Sad story there, Stephen. And also in Bloemfontein, convicted rapist and murderer Thabo Beste, his girlfriend Nandipha Makutumana and 7 co-accused will appear in the Free State High Court for pre-trial hearing. The hearing is expected to be postponed due to some accused changing the legal representation at the 11th hour. Yeah.
Again, yes.
Again, Stephen, again. And also today, Stephen, is International Mother Language Day. We will be tracking different events to mark the day. Chief among them is Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga delivering a keynote address at the International Mother Language Day conference out in East London, down in the Eastern Cape. The day celebrates language diversity and, of course, variety worldwide.
It's fascinating, some of the debates and discussions we have around language.
Most definitely.
And how some languages, I think, really are growing increasingly at risk.
I must say, though, I was tempted to start with Xhosa, but I thought I might just throw you off, Stephen.
It wouldn't be the first time.
And finally, Stephen, Stats SA will be releasing the January inflation figures, which are expected to have increased to 5.4% from 5.3%. So it doesn't get any better now.
Can we
does it?
please have interest rate cuts? Someone, somewhere.
Please.
Take the governor out, buy him a nice glass of, I don't know, and have a chat.
Hey, don't tempt me, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen.
Loyanda Mayome, thank you. 20 minutes after 6.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, fine, becoming partly cloudy. Isolated afternoon showers and thundershowers, 17 and 33. Johannesburg, fine, becoming partly cloudy. Isolated afternoon showers and thundershowers, 15 and 31. Vereeniging, fine, becoming partly cloudy. Isolated afternoon showers and thundershowers, 16 and 32. Bombela, cloudy. Morning fog patches, 19 and 28. Polokwane, cloudy. Isolated showers and thundershowers in the morning. Otherwise, partly cloudy, 18 and 31. Mahekeng, partly cloudy, isolated afternoon thundershowers, 19 and 35. Vryburg, partly cloudy, isolated afternoon thundershowers, 20 and 37. Mangaung, fine, becoming partly cloudy, 15 and 38. Kimberley, fine, becoming partly cloudy, 19 and 38. Uppington, partly cloudy, a bit of a breather for you today. Uppington, 25 and 38. Cape Town, cloudy, becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon, a moderate to fresh southwesterly wind 18 and 24. George, cloudy, light rain in places later, a moderate northwesterly wind 15 and 25. Gqeberha, cloudy with light isolated showers, rain later, a fresh to strong southwesterly 17 and 25. East London, partly cloudy, becoming cloudy with isolated showers, rain from the afternoon, a light northeasterly wind 18 and 26. eThekwini, partly cloudy, becoming cloudy with isolated showers and rain, a moderate to fresh northeasterly 21 and 29. Richards Bay, partly cloudy, a fresh to strong northeasterly 23 and 33. And Pietermaritzburg, morning fog, otherwise partly cloudy, isolated afternoon thunder showers and 19 and 32.
Attention all HPCSA registered practitioners. It is your responsibility to comply with CPD requirements. Non-compliance may result in suspension, writing a compulsory board examination, or other penalties imposed by the professional boards. The CPD program is ongoing and practitioners must immediately comply to remain registered with council. To view your CPD status, update contact details or perform other self-service functions, access the HPCSA online portal or visit www.hpcsa.co.za.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Load shedding is a controlled way to balance the supply and demand of electricity on the power grid and to prevent a blackout. Eskom and government are working hard to solve the energy crisis and improve power generation capacity. If we all use only what we need, we could help reduce demand on the network and ultimately end load shedding together. Government and Eskom, working hard to reduce and ultimately end load shedding.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international news.
23 minutes after 6, good morning. In the Red Sea, it's now emerged that Houthi groups targeting shipping in the area have now used an unmanned submarine to attack a ship for the first time. In other words, the battle that has seen missiles and drones attacking Western shipping is now going underwater as well. The US and the UK have been launching more rocket attacks on the Houthi installations that are launching these attacks on shipping. The Houthis still appear to have supplies of missiles that everyone presumes is from Iran. The Houthis have said they're launching these attacks to prevent any ship from getting through to Israel, and it's doing this in solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza. David Ulima is a research officer in maritime security at the Institute for Security Studies. David, good morning. Thanks for your time on SAFM this morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for having me.
The fact this battle is going underwater, I mean, it really shows the sophistication of these devices. Where are the Houthis getting them from?
So, like you rightly said, suspicion so far is that these weapons are coming from Iran. The Houthis, while they have a long history of fighting, do not have the capabilities to carry out this kinds of attacks. So far, we've seen this play out in the realm of unmanned aerial vessels, and now we're seeing it enter into the fray of unmanned surface vessels with the submarine attacks. And this presents a whole new challenge for the region, but also for the international partners, the US, the UK, and other European countries.
I mean, I presume it's just a lot harder. I mean, this has always been the case with shipping, isn't it? It's much harder to defend yourself against something that happens underwater.
No, absolutely. The other worry that we're looking at currently is the threat that this presents to subsea data cables, which are responsible for carrying 90% of global communication. So we're not only speaking about things from a military perspective. We're not looking at the financial sector. We're looking at communications through the phone like now, your emails, and also from a military perspective, you might know that Djibouti, which is a Red Sea adjacent African state, hosts a number of international military bases. So the international community will be looking at this quite closely.
Sure. The US keeps attacking these Houthi installations. Is that going to work? I mean, they seem to be able to get regular supplies. They're very mobile. As I understand it, the technology that they're using is much, much cheaper than what the Americans are using. So, I mean, are these US attacks going to have any impact on stopping the Houthis at all?
So the Houthis really benefit from maritime insecurity. So the longer that this plays out, the more beneficial it is for them, because they're using it to garner local support using anti-Western rhetoric that is in Yemen. So as long as we only apply a purely militaristic approach, I don't think this will stop. They are determined to continue this cause, and I don't think you can stop them from a purely military approach. And the US and the UK and other international partners are using Resolution 2722, imposed by the United Nations Security Council on January 10 to justify these attacks. African states, the A3 on the UN Security Council, that is Sierra Leone, Algeria, and Mozambique, have called on humanitarian grounds to look at a more diplomatic approach, to have a balance of that in order to find long-lasting solutions. Algeria did draft a resolution for a ceasefire on humanitarian grounds, and it was vetoed by the US just, I think, yesterday.
Last night, yeah.
So I think this will continue for quite some time.
David Ulima, thank you. Research Officer in Maritime Security at the Institute for Security Studies. 28 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, the difference between the leagues, I mean, Sundowns versus Sundowns versus La Masia, it's a huge difference.
I thought that was a tennis score, 6-1. That was the score line that Sundowns beat La Masia, Dobsonville Stadium last night. What an overwhelming win for them, and an emphatic scoreline. That group, La Masia, coached by Dane Clate, with coach Rulani Mokoena of Sundowns, impressed with the opposition.
I haven't seen them play any other way. I've watched 4 games and they play exactly the same way. Against Venda, they played away from home, played open possession, build-ups. Against JDR, same. Against Tuks, same. Against Sekhukhune in a friendly at Johannesburg Stadium, same.
SuperSport United claimed a 3-1 win over Cape Town City. That was penalties after a 1-1 draw in the Nedbank Cup. Last 32 match took place at Lucas Moripa Stadium. Now doors have opened for several top Bafana stars. 5 men could play in Europe soon. South Africa's bronze medal finish during the recent AFCON in Ivory Coast has sparked interest in several of the country's top players. Teboho Mokoena, Kolisi Modau, Spepelo Sitole, Evidence Mahopa, Bongo Khushile Shlongwane are some of the names that have been touted. Elsewhere, Erling Haaland's second-half goal moved Manchester City 1 point behind the Premier League leaders Liverpool as they beat Brentford 1-0. And motorsport, the double world champion Francesco Bagnaia sending a warning to his rivals. He was on the Lusail circuit for his testing in Qatar. He edged out his Ducati teammate Enea Bastianini by 0.120 seconds. And finally, tennis. Croatia's Donna Vekic upset the second seed Arina Sabalenka, and this was in the round of 16 match, and it took 2 hours at the Dubai Tennis Championship. Here's Vekic.
Yeah, it was a great match. First set was very tough, and I was a breakdown in the second. I was with one leg on the beach already, but somehow managed to turn it around, and just really happy to be through to the next round.
We'll bring you more sport on Sunrise. Headlines top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You're with SAFM. We'll talk about a rubbish collection in Kuruleni. That's coming next. You're with SAFM leading the conversation. No load shedding now. Stage 2 later, 6:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines today, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will be faced with the challenging task of delivering a budget that seeks to balance the limited revenue collections against various competing spending priorities on the backdrop of what is expected to be a highly contested election year. His attempts at this includes raising new taxes in the region of 15 billion rand, which the minister announced during the mid-term budget in November last year. It's official, South Africans go to the polls on May 29th. President Cyril Ramaphosa declared the date yesterday. The IEC says it will now start to prepare to host the 2024 national and provincial elections. And a legal analyst expects the pre-trial conference today in the murderer and rapist Thabo Beste's prison escape case to be short. This is due to the accused number 9, Zimbabwe national Zanda Moyo's legal representatives withdrawing from the case. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
I was just having a look at the Mopani Highway coming into Pretoria, thinking it is a lot heavier than normal down towards Esky and Perth Valley. And motorists now reporting the lights are out there. So R80 into Pretoria this morning, extra heavy backlogs as you come in towards that Esky and Perth Valley junction. Joburg looks generally okay. Got the usual sort of hotspots building, including the N3 coming up in towards the works at Van Buren. And the Mike 1 this morning from Boyson through to Empire, busy as it normally is. 2 major truck crashes along the N3 route between Durban and Joburg. One between Bergville and the Tugela 1 stop. That's a truck crash that I understand is blocking both lanes. And also another big one in the Free State area just south of Vilka Plaza. It's a truck that's overturned plus a container lying across the road. There are some traffic restrictions both sides on that section of the N3 as well. Cape Town, we mentioned this earlier. It looks like being a busy Wednesday. The N1 inbound full of traffic between Brackenfell and Sable Road. The N2 fairly busy as well today. Very busy coming in from Khayelitsha, and you sit in traffic all the way through really to about the Mowbray Main Road exit. And a collision if you're in the Nyanga area, Govan and Becky westbound at Dana Fontaine Road. There's quite a queue of traffic building into that scene. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning.
Good morning. Hi there.
Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, it is markets in Asia-Pacific regions that are leading with gains. Investors are responding positively to the decision by China's central bank to cut interest rates on home loans. China's central bank has cut interest rates by nearly half a percentage point to boost the country's struggling property market and the economy. So in Asian markets, China's Shanghai Composite is up 1.7%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng is up 3%, and Japan's Nikkei is down 0.7%. Before the US market opens later today, the US futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each down 0.2%. And in the currency market, the US dollar to the rand is 18.88. The local currency has been quite volatile due to concerns that interest rates in the US might not be cut soon.
And then the jobless rate going up again, 32.1%. Basically, throw away all the numbers. We have about 13 million people who want to work but can't get a job.
Yeah, there were 7.9 million people who were unemployed in the last 3 months of 2023. And when including people who are not economically active and discouraged from looking for a job, the number of jobless people is about 13.4 million. Statistics South Africa has released the latest unemployed figures. The official unemployment rate increased to 32.1% in the fourth quarter of 2023 from 31.9% in the third quarter. The unemployment crisis is a function of poor education standards and people who do not have adequate skills required for a 21st century economy. It is also a function of a poor performing and mismanaged economy that cannot create new jobs.
And then things to watch out for in the budget, talking of managing the economy.
Yeah, the first thing to look out for is for tax increases. The government wants to raise 15 billion rand through tax increases. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, will unveil which existing taxes will be increased or new ones to be introduced. Government bailouts are the second thing to look out for. Transnet needs financial help from the government to pay down its debt, and the Post Office needs a 3.8 billion rand to fund its business rescue process. The third thing to look out for in the budget is budget cuts of departments. Last year, the government started the process of cutting the budgets of health, education, and housing. And lastly, how will the government deal with debt levels? Government debt is set to rise from 4.8 trillion rand in 2024 to exceed 6 trillion rand by 2026. This is quite concerning, especially government debt levels.
Ray Machlaka, thanks very much. Back, of course, tomorrow. More live coverage of the budget through the afternoon, 23 minutes to 7.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula, good morning.
Stivovo, refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
The United Nations Security Council had sanctioned 6 people from 5 armed groups in the eastern DRC.
Stephen, remember yesterday there was a briefing before the United Nations Security Council on the situation in the eastern DRC. Now, when you are going to the route of sanctions, you look at arms embargo, travel ban, asset freeze. And these are the leaders coming from Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, Tiriwaneo Armed Group, as well as the National People's Coalition for the Sovereignty of the Congo, known also as the CNP-HC rebels. Now, you'll find, Stephen, that once we have these sanctions, also assists the Congolese government. It assists the SADC mission how to deal with the renegades, how to deal with the faces and the voices behind this conflict. It also have went on the military voice of the Rwanda-backed M23 also being sanctioned as well. One will understand, Stephen, when you have to understand the crisis in the East, the Rwanda 1994 genocide also come to play out here. So this is important from the UN Security Council briefing yesterday, how to deal with those who are leading this conflict in the eastern DRC.
And then in Madagascar, the Madagascan president, the ex-chief of staff, has been convicted in London for offering mining licenses. What happened?
Stephen, this was between 2021 and 2023. 2021 to 2023, the chief of staff of the current president, Andre Rajolina, it was with the gem fields. This was also about embezzlement. It was bribery, exchange of substantial bribes. And that's how the courts in UK had to find him guilty, Stephen, for him being involved in the bribery with the foreign companies. And that has also cost Madagascar, by the way, Stephen, if one looks at this case, how it has taken so long. One looks at that it has taken almost, we can say, 2 years so far for this case to be even finalized. But it shows how the courts in London as well in Madagascar, they were able to cooperate for the arrest of Romeo Andre Soa, age 47, who has been charged for this embezzlement and this substantial bribe of working with the Gemfields mines.
And then in Russia, the Agricultural Ministry, they've been shipping 200,000 metric tons of free grain to 6 African countries.
Remember last year, Stephen, Africa-Russia summit, President Vladimir Putin promised what they call the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Now, who has benefited out of it? 50,000 tons each to Somalia and the Central African Republic, 25,000 tons each to Mali, Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, and Eritrea. That shows what Putin have said before, Stephen. And remember, the agricultural year has started already. It will end until the 30th of June. So it is important for what the Russia summit have said before in terms of building their cooperation with African countries.
And then in Mozambique, the government there has seemed to threaten journalists who are covering the conflict in Cabo Delgado. What are people saying?
Stephen, that came from the governor of Cabo Delgado, Valige Tuaba, who was saying that the journalists, it appears that they are in the same script with the Islamic terrorists, that they have always have what he says, an information that is very doubtful in its origin, and it seems that they are in line with the terrorists in Cabo Delgado. Now you'll understand the regional chapter, the MISA in Mozambique, is concerned with such allegation against journalists who are independent covering this conflict in Cabo Delgado, Stephen, because once you don't have information coming from the northern part of Mozambique from local journalists, it becomes a concern of what is happening in Mozambique. So MISA came very strong against the government of Mozambique and particularly against the governor of Cabo Delgado, saying that the freedom of press it is guaranteed by the constitution of Mozambique. So it is important for them to cover these conflict zones.
And then you're looking at our archive this day, 2001.
23 years ago, Stephen, the legendary Pan-African ambassador Zenzile, Dr. Miriam Zenzile Makeba, was nominated in the category of World Music Album on his album Homeland at the 43rd Annual Grammy Awards. It was important, Stephen, because from this album, he also got the First Scorer Lifetime Achievement Award. Important to even put a context, Stephen, of how Miriam Makeba played an important role that in 1964 also he raised the question of apartheid before the UN Special Committee. And it is important with the conflict in Gaza now that he raised that my country has been turned into a huge prison. I felt that the time has come for the whole of humanity to shout out and to act with firmness to stop these crazy rulers from dragging our country into horrifying disaster. A very important quote of Miriam Makeba that is in line of what is happening in the Middle East, what is happening in Sudan, as well as in the Eastern DRC. Asante sana, SG, as you are still leading the conversation.
Rose Advocate Sipho Mantula, thanks very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Back tomorrow with SFM, 18 minutes to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
A call now from Europe. Voyo, hi, you're in Europe. Good morning. You want to talk about the police in Cape Town?
Yes, we should say good things about the police, not only the negative all the time.
Yeah.
My man was there in Melkbosstrand in Cape Town, and then he went with his friend, and they left a rucksack.
Yeah.
But 30 minutes later, he realized that he left it on the beach.
Hmm.
And then there was a lady who realized that they left the bag, and then asked another truck driver came to deliver something in the shop by the beach to call the police. And then within no time, they came with a sniffer dog to check what's wrong in the bag.
Yeah.
They didn't sniff the 1,000 euros was in my bag.
Sure.
And they took, yes, then they took the bag to the police station. 3 only African police officers, let me be specific about the race. I'll tell you, they didn't even take a cent from my man's wallet. So the police were there on the duty right about on the 22nd January. We did a good job on the day shift.
So they found the rucksack, they checked it out with the dog, and then they took it to the police station. Your man went to the police station and said, look, I left my rucksack on the beach, and there was cash in it, large amount of cash, and it was all good. It was given back to them.
Yes, not a cent was taken.
Sure, boy, it's a good story. Thank you. So did someone take it to the police, or did the police find it themselves? Do you know?
No. There was a lady who was sitting by the beach, and this was the
she saw it, yeah.
Yeah, and then he asked another man to call the police.
Yeah.
I think it was the tourist because the man was there, the local number.
Yes.
And then they came with a sniffer dog.
Yes. Sure, Voya, good story. Thanks very much indeed. Nice to hear a good story for a change, I mean, especially about the police. So often we hear sort of difficult stories about the police, don't we? But nice to hear a good story. Voya on the line from Europe. Come back to us safely, by the way, Voya. Don't stay there for the rest of your life, please. Ninja in Durban, hi. You want to talk about the latest veto by the US at the United Nations? There was a call for a ceasefire in Gaza. What point are you making, Ninja?
No, I'm making a relative comparison. It's a manipulation of events, the disingenuousness of America and Britain. On one hand, they're calling for dialogue in the DRC. On the other hand, in Gaza, they veto. Britain follows America. They manipulate it. Now, Britain is using a cheap argument of the hostages. I mean, if there's a ceasefire, they'll obviously release the hostages. It's a foregone conclusion. Now, Britain and America work hand in hand, but the countries in the world are in the majority, and the circumstances will change in Gaza. Gaza, the Palestinian people will have a state for themselves because Israel cannot dictate to the world who controls the Palestinians. Now, they have no right to do this, Israel. And they'll come off worse off because Gaza will be a vacuum, and you'll see the rockets flying on all over the place. Now, Hezbollah is firing rockets in the northern part of Israel. And this is what's going to happen to Israel. And Israel is heavily in debt in billions. It's not a war, it's a conflict, one-sided argument here, lopsided, you know, and these powers are supporting Israel.
So, Ninja, your point is that the US is being disingenuous.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know, they talk with like a square peg in a round hole.
Yes. All right.
Know, you can see it through it.
Yeah, no, Ninja, thank you. I mean, lots of criticism for the US during this time over its behavior around Israel and Gaza, of course. You know, the number 086 000 2032, 14 minutes to 7.
Imagine if you could save time like you save money. A second here, a minute there. Type a little faster, walk a little faster. Or you could stop scrolling on the internet. Just think of all the hours you'll save. Now, what if you could take all that time and invest it? Watch it grow. Until eventually, one day, you'd have so much time that you wouldn't know what to do with it all. But unfortunately, time doesn't work like that. It can't be stored or banked. And unlike money, you can't make it back. That's why after 50 years of investing, we've learned that time is the greatest gift of all. And the good news is, if you invest early, time gives you money. And then money gives you more time to do whatever you want to do, even if it is scrolling on the internet. Ellen Gray, long-term investing. Ellen Gray is an authorized FSP.
Masandawana had full control in front of their home fans against FC Nouadhibou, and they want to triumph again to stay on the summit of Group A. Meanwhile, the Mauritanian outfit says not in their own backyard. This is the CAF Champions League. The Orange Club battles it out with Kabuyelo. Witness Africa's beautiful game, FC Nouadhibou versus Mamelodi Sundowns, the Saturday 24 February at 5:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag we love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Some really interesting ideas coming through on Twitter X this morning. I asked the question, simple question in a way. We now know when we're going to vote, 29th of May. Have you decided what you're going to do yet? Molefe Lebogang says, I really hope that the Cooperative Governance Minister can announce that no alcohol will be sold from the 28th to the 29th of May so we can have the smooth running of elections. I've never really thought of that, sort of basically try and sort of stop the sale of alcohol just before the elections. You know, it's always a public holiday. I must admit, it's a very interesting idea. I don't know if that'll work. And Klambok says, I'm registered. I will vote even if it snows. We need change. Pakamani says, I've long concluded I'll vote for the EFF. General Peki says, I'll vote for the EFF. Nestus Fenta says, I'm going to vote. You say the ANC needs to understand fewer people in the ANC are going to get a salary. I must say, so far on my timeline, very little support for the ANC, if any, actually. So, yeah, lots of comment about that. Jane on the line from Johannesburg. Hi. Government and getting money. Go for it.
Okay, hi. As a self-employed person, the best way to make money is to do a job well and get more jobs. So, fix up Eskom, sell more electricity.
In other words, it's about competence. If you execute well, if you know what you're going to do and you do it properly, all sorts of good consequences flow from that.
Exactly, and with all good things, they can be taxed.
Yes, I suppose so. All right. Jane on the line from Johannesburg. Good point, actually. It is about competence in government. If you govern well, things change. Chris and Peter Maritzburg. You say you know where the finance minister can get his 15 billion rand.
Exactly.
Where?
Cut the blue lights brigade, as well as cut cabinet by 60%.
Yeah.
That's money right there.
Yeah.
Immediately, that needs intention as well as political will. The problem is that we have people who do not see the country is really going down as in a crisis. So they believe that they can live a large life with all the fats and the benefits.
And the generator and the house and the this and the that.
Exactly. While millions of people are hungry and go hungry, and millions of young people, as you were speaking, are unemployed and do not have a prospect of getting a job, and thus increasing the tax base.
Chris and Peter Maritzburg, thank you. Really appreciate the time. Well, interesting ideas coming through. 10 minutes to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good morning. No traffic lights on the bottom end of the Montpellier Highway coming to Pretoria this morning. It's the Montpellier Highway R80 at Eskia and Purflelly Drive. So there is a very heavy backlog on that very busy route through. And I just see a note coming out from the city of Tshwane saying most parts of the city are without power due to last night's storm. It's caused massive damage and led to area power outages across most parts of the city. So there you are. It is likely to be widely sort of felt across the Tshwane commuting areas this morning. We'll keep an eye on the big ones for you. Otherwise, Joburg side looking a bit busy on the N3. There's a breakdown at Helderbeest and then the left lane closed at Van Buren. So coming up from Germiston and Alberton, again, that's a very busy one. Durban side, a breakdown on the N3. This is between Spaghetti Junction and the Paradise Valley exit. The breakdown is on the Pinetown bound carriageway in the middle lane. It's very quickly, this section, with all the roadworks that have been going in lately, sort of starting to replicate the breakdowns on the N2 that we've had forever between Mgenera and Spaghetti Junction through that roadwork. So on a daily basis, you get a breakdown now in that N3 roadworks, and you feel the effects of it because you're already down some lanes, and breakdowns reduce the lane capacity even further. So on your way to Pinetown, it is very slow. Cape Town, a lot of traffic this morning into the city centre. The N1 from Belleville through to the Kuburg, get a change now. The N2 from the airport through towards Hospital Bend looking really busy. And there are some road closures in the Cape Town CBD around City Hall, parts of Hanover Street, parts of Darling Street, the main Darling Street, Corporation Street as well. Those routes closed down around the City Hall for today's Budget Speed events. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
For years, Outsurance has been saying they'll save you money on your car insurance, or you can ask for 500 Rand or 1,500 Rand cash if they don't. Here's Fundi, 46 from Brackenfell.
I was not happy with what I was paying. I heard about the 500 Rand from Outsurance, but they give me lesser amount for my car. I'm paying 523 Rand on my 2013 Hyundai iX35.
So here's how it works. SMS out to 30754. We'll give you a no-obligation car insurance quote. If the quote is less than you're currently paying, you'll end up saving money on your car insurance every month. And if it's more than you're currently paying, you can ask for 500 Rand. And if you've been with the same insurer and claim-free for 3 years or more, tell us you want 1,500 Rand.
Give Outsurance a call. It's a win-win. You can't lose.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
Sure, girl, this Ford Puma, love the interior. And how about its award-winning engine and selectable drive modes? From only $7,899 per month with 0% deposit, Primeless 5.5%, and a driver assistance pack included. Sure, get more with the new Ford Puma Titanium from only $7,899 per month. Visit your nearest Ford dealer today. T&Cs apply.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
6 minutes to 7 the time. Well, lots of conversations this morning, as you know, about the date for the elections. Then also, of course, the budget. 15 billion Rand. Where would you get the money from? What would you do? And where would you spend it? What would you cut back? I think of several things we can sort of maybe cut back. But some of them, you know, I made the point earlier, we can't send soldiers to the SANDF soldiers, our soldiers, to the DRC and not properly equip them, for example. You can't cut back there. You certainly can't cut back on social grants from what I can see. Voice notes coming through this morning on 0614 104 107.
Running Steve over, there is places where money can be cut instead of services like health and education. Cut the Blue Light Brigade, cut the wastage, reduce cabinet, and a lot of wastage in the public servants can be cut in order for the money to use, but also not used for consumption, used for production, so it reproduces itself. Chris in Maritzburg.
Chris, thanks. Yeah, I mean, people talking about the VIP brigade, I think that's one of the big issues this morning. Pumzile in Humansdorp. Pumzile, I think I know who you're going to be voting for because you represent them in a council.
How are you, FG?
Yeah, I'm well. How are you?
Great, man, great. FG, my hand has been itching.
Yes.
For voting. And now that the president has actually pronounced the date, and I am very happy. That itching still continues. Can't wait for the 29th. And I think we are going to surprise a lot of our critics. The ANC is going to govern this country, continue with the agenda of improving the lives of the masses of the poor, of the poorest, without any coalition, we're going to get an outright majority because the people knows that it is indeed the ANC that have changed their lives. So I can't wait for that date, by the way, SG.
So, I mean, Phumzile, do you think people are making their decisions over what's happened in the last 30 years or the last 5 years? I mean, I know that you support the ANC, and I'm glad to hear it because we have so many people who phone in and are very critical of the governing party at the moment. You look at the situation we're in, I can see why people are critical. But why are you so confident?
Now, when we take audit, SG, we must take audit based on the 30 years. And within that 30 years, honestly, ANC have done a lot. We agree that there is still a lot to be done. But the real agent to change the lives of the people is the ANC. That is why I'm overconfident that the people knows who was in front of liberating them from oppression, apartheid, and bruder bond mentality.
But does that go on forever, does it?
No. We must put a target as the ANC as to when do we want to achieve a realistic change to even an ordinary person on the street. That is what we must put, a target, definitely, as we move forward. That every South African must now realize that indeed they are actually enjoying the fruits of the liberation they actually fought for tirelessly.
Okay, I mean, I hear you. But, I mean, if we look at the sort of corruption that I think we still see, that people tell us they see, if we look at the, potholes everywhere, Phumzile, I mean, you must see that. I think people are very frustrated, man.
Absolutely. They have the right. But I will continue to say to you, SG, potholes are not only affecting where the ANC governs. Even you can go where the DA governs. There are potholes. And unfortunately, that is the aging of the infrastructure which have to be attended to. But nevertheless, I would like to say, lastly, SG, insofar as corruption is concerned, I have always said the brand ANC has not done wrong. It is the individuals that have done wrong under the brand ANC. Now, we must actually separate an individual from the brand and an individual that is abusing that brand for self-enrichment.
Does the same go for the DA and the EFF too?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Phumzile and Humansdorp, thank you. I don't know if people are going to see it like that. I mean, maybe. But, there are lots of different directions that this goes in. And sort of how the elections are looking. Phumzile and Humansdorp, as you know, a councillor for the ANC in that area. Let's go to Khobakwani. Jimmy, hi, the elections.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, well, go for it.
All is well. Look, the ANC people, I don't know where do they get the guts and the energy to say they're going to govern this country until Jesus Christ comes. But when you look at things on the ground, man, it's different from what they are saying.
Yeah.
Totally different. I mean, on Tuesday, the state SA indicated that 32% of young people are not working.
Yeah.
And they're claiming to get or to win election using the vote of young people. I mean, who in the...
Jimmy, sorry, say that again. Who? What?
I mean, who in their right state of mind will forever put the government that doesn't take care of them in power?
All right, Jimmy and Khobakwani, losing you on that line, but I can hear the point that you're making there. Calls coming through, I think, in response to Phumzile. Big focus on the elections. We'll speak to the Electoral Commission, the IEC, in just a couple of moments. Couple of questions. Are they ready? There's still one or two court cases and procedures and Parliament and all the rest. Also registering to vote, all of those things. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, big focus on the elections and the huge number of young people who are still unemployed. Really, the biggest problem that we face, in my view. You with SFM leading the conversation. It's Wednesday morning. It's 7 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, the finance minister to deliver budget speech and more reaction to announcement of election date. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. Today, Finance Minister Inoko Dongwana will be faced with the challenging task of delivering a budget that seeks to balance limited revenue collections against various competing spending priorities on the backdrop of what is expected to be a highly contested election year. His attempts at this include raising new taxes in the region of 15 billion rand, which the minister announced during the mid-term budget in November last year. Raising additional taxes by increasing value-added tax or personal income is viewed as the most effective way. However, it is not an ideal option for taxpayers already burdened with high cost of living. A senior associate director at Deloitte, Billy Joubert, says there are no low-hanging fruits where tax is concerned.
The easiest way to raise more money is to push up the VAT rate. That's highly unlikely to happen in an election year, if ever. Possibly we talk about the NHI, given that the NHI is very much a social initiative, possibly it could be seen to justify in the future, an increase in the VAT rate, because it's essentially, one way of moving the dial very quickly. But I certainly don't foresee that happening anytime soon. So I think what we'll be seeing is a continued focus on enforcement. So I don't think there's any low-hanging fruit in terms of, changing the tax system.
It's official, South Africans will go to the polls on May the 29th. President Cyril Ramaphosa declared the date yesterday. The Independent Electoral Commission says it will now start to prepare to host the 2024 national and provincial elections. It will implement its elections roadmap, which includes the proclamation of the election date and the closure of the voters' roll, which currently stands at just over 27 million. The IEC's Chief Electoral Officer is Saiba Mabulu.
We're quite happy with the amount of time it gives us. We'll be able to do all the processes and all the procedures together with political parties and independent candidates. We will be comfortable with the time period towards the 29th of May. Those that are not registered, you still have an opportunity to register either at the local office of the IEC or online.
DA leader John Steenhuisen says he's happy that President Cyril Ramaphosa has heeded the call by political party leaders to give certainty to the date that elections will be held.
I'm very comfortable with where we're at in the polling and the hard work that's been done, particularly on registration. Our manifesto is launched and it's been favourably received. And we are absolutely committed to bringing to an end the 30 years of ANC failure, corruption and state capture. And I think the upcoming election is now an opportunity for the most important people in a democracy, and that is the voters, to choose a path of progress, transparency and accountability. So we say bring it on. We're looking forward to meeting this campaign head on and setting out an alternative vision of hope, prosperity and opportunity for more South Africans.
A legal analyst expects the pre-trial conference today in the murderer and rapist Thabo Beste's prison escape case to be short. This is due to accused number 9, Zimbabwean national Zanda Moyo's legal representative withdrawing from the case. It is going to be the first time Beste, his lover, Dr. Nandi Pamakutumana, and 7 others appear together in the Free State High Court in Bloemfontein. The accused face charges of aiding and abetting Beste to escape lawful custody, violation of a dead body, fraud, corruption and arson. Dikeledi Muyeti is a legal analyst.
One of the accused, I think is Mr. Moyo, the attorney has withdrawn from representing him. Therefore, tomorrow he'll be given a chance whether he's going to appoint a legal attorney of private or going to go to the state or he'll represent himself. And then how long he's going to take for him to come with those results. And once he has the attorney, and then the matter is going to be postponed for the attorney to be available for the day of the next postponement date.
So essentially,
And finally, there's been widespread condemnation at the UN of the United States decision to block another resolution demanding immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Washington argued that the text would jeopardize sensitive talks to end the war between Hamas and Israel. Britain's representative to the UN, Barbara Woodward, agrees.
Simply calling for a ceasefire, as this resolution does, will not make it happen, as it could endanger the hostage negotiations. It could actually make a ceasefire less likely. The way to stop the fighting and potentially stop it from restarting is to begin with a pause to get hostages out and aid in.
Recapping your top story, today Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will be faced with the challenging task of delivering a budget that seeks to balance limited revenue collections against various competing spending priorities on the backdrop of what is expected to be a highly contested election year. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 7:30.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. Soccer news. Mamelodi Sundowns coach Rulani Mokwena has revealed that the defenders Modao and Mvala will be sidelined for 2 months, and at the same time Cape Town City exit the Nedbank Cup after losing 3-1 on penalties. We'll bring you all these stories and more just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Widespread power failure through the Tshwane region this morning. A lot of lights out. That follows yesterday's storm event through the region. The big ones are the Momponi Highway at Eskia and Pathleli, but it looks like Moot Street and maybe Vanderhof coming down to Eskia and Pathleli are offline as well. There's some very heavy traffic on the R80 and those other routes through that area. Breakdown on your way to the airport this morning. 2 lanes are closed. R21 south between Pomona Road and Atlas Road, and that's quite a heavy backlog. Durban, you've got the phenomenon of major highway upgrades all happening at the same time. So the N2 north of Spaghetti Junction, that's a heavy queue into that work zone that begins from the M7 this morning. And at the same time, the N3's now got a lot of traffic restrictions between Spaghetti Junction and Paradise Valley, the split to Pinetown. And you get breakdowns at peak time in that section. And we've got one now. The middle lane is blocked on the N3 heading into Paradise Valley. So it's a really big queue from the Pavilion Mall heading into that scene. The M4, the Southern Freeway, quite slow through Jacobs and Clarewood area up towards the M7 exit. And if you're driving into Cape Town, it's all very busy, including likely a busy CBD today. A lot of road closures around City Hall for today's budget speed event. Those closures already in place, including parts of Hanover Street and Darling Street, a main route in and out of central Cape Town. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
8 after 7, good morning. You with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. In a moment, Simon Mabolo already on hold for you, the Chief Electoral Officer at the Electoral Commission. Are they ready for the elections? I'm sure he's going to say yes, but just a few sort of things that need to be sorted out. We'll find out more about that in just a moment. The 29th of May, still time for you to register to vote at the moment, by the way. Big conversations to come around the budget. Youth unemployment, really the biggest problem I think that we face in our society at the moment. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the situation around the Finance Minister and how difficult it is. Don't forget, around half an hour from now, Toko Didiza, the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, on the Inganyama Trust. Big developments there, 8 after 7.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, that statement coming through from the presidency last night, confirming President Cyril Ramaphosa now formally deciding that we'll vote in the 2024 elections on Wednesday, the 29th of May. I presume that'll be a public holiday. No announcement of that yet. I should remind you, by the way, as I understand the law, you can still register to vote, that you have to do it before the election is proclaimed in the Government Gazette. At that point, the voters' roll closes. Simon Mabolo is the Chief Electoral Officer of the Electoral Commission. Mr. Mabolo, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and same to your listeners.
The 29th of May. Are you comfortable with that date? There's a lot going on at the moment. Are you comfortable you'll be able to hold a proper, free, fair, legitimate election on that date?
It is a fair date. It gives us enough opportunity to deal with all the elements related to preparations for 2024 elections. It's a date upon which the President consulted with the Commission as well as with the Premier. So we hope that every stakeholder is comfortable with the date and we can make it happen.
As I understand it, there still might be a few things that need to be sorted out. I don't know if it's court rulings or just Parliament around independent candidates. Are you worried at all about those sort of loose ends? Some of them could be important loose ends, or they could delay things if they're not sorted out.
Yeah, well, it would have been preferable if they went those loose ends. But I hope that they'll be able to finalize them in time for the election. The court case, the Rivoria Cycle court case related to the signatures for parties with no representation in any legislative assembly. We hope that it will be disposed quite expeditiously so as to create certainty for all role players.
Okay, I mean, we couldn't have a situation where because we're waiting for one court ruling, the election has to be postponed. That's not going to happen, right?
No, I don't anticipate that. In fact, we think that it's important that everybody focuses on the date, do everything that needs to happen to make it a memorable election for everybody.
We know our population is growing, although I don't know if the percentage of people or the number of people registered to vote is growing quite as quickly. I don't think it is. Do you have more challenges now in more places than you did in the past? Do you need to get more equipment to more voting stations than you've ever had to do before? I mean, would it be fair to say this, in a way, could almost be the biggest election we've ever had?
Well, there are challenges, certainly. One of those challenges is the increasing complexity in managing an election, especially as it relates to logistics. And in that regard, one of the biggest components is the ballot paper. As I speak to you now, I'm not certain how many political parties are going to be contesting and how many independents are going to make it, and therefore what size of ballot paper we're going to be using. It may well be that we are in the region of a 2-column ballot. It may well be that we are in the region of a dual-page ballot. Whichever materializes, we've tried to make preparations. We've prepared capacity to deal with those situations. But still, there's increased complexity. That's one. Two, disinformation is our biggest problem today. It wasn't as big a problem 10 years ago, and it has increased complexity. Any chief electoral officer in the world is no longer worried only about logistics. They are now also worried about digital disinformation.
I mean, it's the way people get their news sometimes, the social media, and there's very little, I suppose, as the Electoral Commission you can do to stop it. I know you are trying to work with other organizations, some of them, people like Meta, like Google, to try and stop it as well.
Yes, we are collaborating with social media partners. We are collaborating with MMA. We've created a reporting portal, Real 411, and so on. But what makes it more difficult is the fact that it is rooted in the freedom of expression of people, which is something that has to be respected. It's a right that people won quite at a heavy price. So, distinguishing what is disinformation and what is genuine free expression, so can all sometimes be a very difficult thing to discern.
It seems there's sort of, just to go back a little bit to this 2-page ballot paper, one of the big concerns will be how you keep them together. You can really only use glue or a staple or maybe, I suppose, some kind of drawing pin or something like that. I don't know. But is that going to be the issue? Is that if you use 2 pages, you have to find some way to stick them together? And I mean, I work in 2 offices where there are just never any staples. I mean, staples, wherever you go, there's a problem.
Certainly, they have to be stitched together, and they need to stay together throughout the value chain, from the printing through our distribution warehouses in the voting station until the point of counting. They really have to stay together. In fact, I'll go beyond that and say, even even post-election, they have to be kept together because the ballots must be kept for 6 months after voting, so that if there's a need to go back to them to count them, then they still need to be intact as a 2-page ballot.
Sure. There are some other things you have to do which you haven't had to do in a national and provincial election before, and I think one of them is perhaps monitoring political party funding. What I'm trying to get to is that your organization has to do more things than you've ever had to do before. Do you have enough money, the budget, the resources to do it properly? I mean, obviously, like everyone, you would need more money, I presume.
Like everybody else, doing things cost money. So, but I think, to be fair to National Treasury, they didn't give us every cent we asked for, but they've given us enough to do a decent job of the work that we need to do on behalf of South Africans.
Simon Mabolo, thank you very much indeed. The Chief Electoral Officer at the Electoral Commission. Ahead of those elections, Wednesday, the 29th of May 2024, 7:15.
Business owners, don't waste your time searching for an employee that has it all. They do not exist. But I will tell you what does exist. The Kia K2700 Workhorse. It's versatile, powerful, and reliable. It also arrives on time every day. Plus, you get 40,000 Rand cashback. It's the business partner you've been waiting for. Visit your nearest Kia dealership for a test drive. T's and C's apply.
Kia. Movement that inspires.
Mzansi Africa.
Siyalobuga.
Siyabulela nangomso.
Thank you for witnessing the Africa Cup of Nations Cote d'Ivoire 2023 in your language of choice on SABC radio stations, digital platforms, and SABC TV channels.
Big ups to Hollywood Bets for being on board.
Your magnificent and heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a spectacular and exhilarating experience during AFCON.
Asibonge. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
17 after 7. Good morning. Well, just a few hours to go now until the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, announces his budget in Parliament. Confirmation yesterday, our unemployment rate edging up again. Maybe the most important number from Statistics South Africa is that 59.4. Pretty much 60% of our young people can't find work. And if you drive around almost anywhere, you'll see people who are literally asking, sometimes, heartbreaking, begging for a job to get some kind of income. Crystal Duncan-Williams is the project lead at Youth Capital. They campaign to help young people into work, to try and create a situation in which more young people are working. Crystal, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
We've seen number after number, more and more evidence showing that our youth unemployment is rising. Why is the figure so high? I mean, there are various things. Obviously, education's a problem. A slowing economy is the problem. But youth unemployment is so much higher than sort of the rest of the population.
So there's a number of factors, and I think part of the problem with the youth unemployment crisis and why it's continued to be a crisis for almost 2 decades now is I think we've always tried to oversimplify it. As you say, education always comes up top. It's a skills mismatch. We just need to educate young people better, and then we'll somehow solve the crisis. And that's just not true. Young people face a number of barriers. Harvard came out with the Growth Lab, came out with a paper last year that said that, corruption and spatial inequality are the two biggest factors in our economy not growing. And obviously spatial inequality as a result of apartheid. But what does that really mean for young people? It means quite literally that young people cannot afford to even get to a place where jobs are, to look for work, never mind get to that job every single day. And so these are the realities of young people. Our latest report shows that 8 in 10 young people have to choose between looking for work or putting food on the table. And so you have all of these layered issues that young people face. They're disconnected physically from opportunities, but they're also disconnected from networks that let them into these opportunities. And then you add into that all of the macroeconomic factors, an economy that's growing at a really slow rate. Some of the numbers we've crunched say we need an economy that's going to grow at least 6%, GDP growth of at least 6%, and we're nowhere near that. And then on top of that, obviously, we have businesses that are weary to hire young people. We see in the last 10 years, again, from crunching the numbers from Stats SA, that even when jobs were created, those jobs went to older counterparts, those older than 35. So, there's a real layered complexity to the issue, and we need to acknowledge those complexities if we really want to tackle this crisis.
So then tackling it would require, so many interventions. I don't really see anyone sort of discussing interventions of the complexity that you're talking about.
And that's part of the problem, Stephen. And in the lead up to elections at Youth Capital, we're going to be campaigning and focusing on that complexity, because often what we'll find is political parties, the governing party, the ANC, and everybody else in their manifestos, will say, oh, we're going to create so many jobs. How? What does that look like? Because many targets have been set over the years and none of them have actually been met. And so I think exactly to your point, any kind of ruling party or any kind of plan that is proposed with regards to tackling youth unemployment has to look at that. It has to involve some kind of way to overcome the cost of job seeking. It has to overcome a skills mismatch. It has to overcome the fact that small businesses, where at Youth Capital we believe there's a real space for job creation, small businesses are just not supported by the government to access tax incentives in the way that bigger firms are, that would allow them to hire more young people. And so you really have to look at it on the supply side and the demand side if you want to come up with a plan that will really make a dent in the 9 million young people who are not in employment, education or training.
We're expecting the budget later. I mean, is there anything the finance minister or government can do there to try and improve the situation?
So we've been campaigning for the continued funding of the presidential employment stimulus, with a particular focus on the Basic Education Employment Initiative, the Social Employment Fund, and the National Youth Service, where young people were the majority of participants. And so that's our primary concern. We've got almost 23,000 signatures on our petition calling for continued long-term funding for that program. And so that's a step in the right direction, giving young people a first work experience. But I think over and above that, we're really interested to see what's happening with the infrastructure projects. Public transport, if we could fix that, we'd help with the cost of job seeking. Transport accounts for half of, 700 Rand a month young people are spending on transport just to look for work. So I think infrastructure challenges. And then, what are we doing at a macroeconomic level to allow the economy to grow at a rate that it hasn't been in recent times?
Crystal Duncan-Williams, thank you from Youth Capital. Appreciate the time. 22 minutes after 7. Well, let's stay on the budget. A lot of speculation about what the minister will do to plug his revenue hole. This shortage estimated to be at around 15 billion rand, whether he'll have to increase taxes in some way or even cut back on expenditure because government simply doesn't have enough money. Lulu Krugel is the PwC chief economist for South Africa. Lulu, good morning to you. Are you expecting the minister to announce tax increases today?
Good morning, Simon. We do expect that. In fact, he mentioned last year in the MTBPS statement in October that we will hear something. The question is just what? And I think that is not an easy one to answer in the current environment because, it's very unlikely that he will increase VAT, for example. It's an election year. It's also not a tax that's particularly palatable, for a broad range of South Africans if there's increases. About 0.5 percentage point increase in VAT would have covered that. But the most likely option that you would probably choose is to allow what we call bracket creep with personal income tax. So not making the annual adjustments for inflation, which in this particular year could hit really hard because inflation was high and we know under how much pressure South African consumers has been.
So, the other option, of course, cutting back on expenditure. And if you look at the social situation around us, the way people are, I suppose, really forced to live, I don't know if a finance minister could cut back on spending now. Never mind the politics of it. The sort of humaneness of it would come under question.
Yes, there's long been a lot that people said around the size of the social grant expenditure, for example. But to be quite honest, to be very, very honest, exactly as you said, that is the only source of income, the only thing that millions of South Africans are using to put some food on the table. So, and in the environment where you can't see massive growth in job numbers, it is unlikely that he will make any changes there. One of the focus areas has been government salaries and the salary bill, though, and the minister has made commitments over a couple of years, and even the finance ministers before him, to say that is something that we're going to address, but they have not been able to do that. So I honestly cannot see where he will cut back on expenditure, maybe a little bit here, a little bit there. I remember again, for example, in the October MTBPS statement, there were some small changes that they made in very different areas. For example, healthcare, I remember funding for HIV/AIDS was reduced, probably because they were thinking that somebody else from external will fund that.
We keep saying, Lulu, how tough the situation around the finance minister is. And I mean, I remember saying last year it was probably the toughest position for a finance minister. I said the same thing the year before. We've been saying it for years. It's just going to get tougher and tougher. And this time next year, it's going to be tougher.
Well, I certainly, it's going to be tough. Let's be honest. It's going to be tough for a while because we need to look at our debt to GDP ratio. It is expected to continue to increase over the next couple of years. But the finance minister will try his best, and Treasury has made commitments to actually keep the growth rate in government debt and that deficit on the budget, under control. And it will be incredibly important that we continue to do so to actually build that trust and continue to build that trust with rating agencies, etc. The truth is that it is going to be extremely tough, but I don't think we should expect, even if it's a very tough year, expect a super exciting budget. I suspect more of the same. And one can actually say that, listen, maybe that's not a bad thing. Although I would have loved to see something from the minister that shows some vision about how we're going to ignite economic growth, that has a bit of a more longer-term view. We have short-term challenges to sort out, but I would love to hear something that has a bit more of a longer-term and strategic view.
Lulu Krugel, thank you. South African Chief Economist at PwC. Well, we'll hear it all, of course, from 2 o'clock this afternoon. Just huge questions around what the Minister will say and what changes he can make. 27 minutes after 7.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Rulani Mokwena making important decisions.
Yeah, I think with World Cup qualifications happening, and he's worried that there's an injury list that could grow. Defenders Kolisa Mudau and Matobi Mvala sidelined for 2 months. Now, the duo are part of the Bafana squad that returned home from AFCON with a bronze medal, but the Sundowns players, they now join teammates Tepelo Maseko on the injury list following their heroics in Cote d'Ivoire. Now, the Brazilians, they thumped the lower league outfit La Masia 6-1 in the Nedbank Cup round of 32 last night. In the meantime, SuperSport United, they claimed a 3-1 win over Cape Town City on penalties after a 1-1 draw in their Nedbank Cup last 32 encounter. All happened at Lucas Moripa Stadium. City bow out of the South African FA Cup after a disappointing loss, and coach Eric Tinkler had this to say.
I thought we had the better chances in the second half. And then when it went into extra time, legs started going. A lot of the players started cramping, and we had to start making changes. And then I think both teams, Bradley had a chance right at the end. We had another chance. So I think 1-1 was fair. And penalties can go either way.
Elsewhere, Kylian Mbappe will take a pay cut to join Real Madrid from Paris Saint-Germain this season in a move that is already being described as the most expensive free transfer in history. The France international striker told Paris Saint-Germain last week he wants to leave the club at the end of the season when his contract is set to expire and will become a Real player on the 1st of July. Elsewhere, Erling Haaland's second-half goal moved Manchester City 1 point behind Premier League leaders Liverpool. They beat Brentford 1-0. City move a point above Arsenal, having taken advantage of their game in hand while keeping the pressure on Liverpool, who host Luton Town tonight in the Premier League. The champions have now won 7 of their last 8 games in the league. Rugby, the Blitzboks are not letting jet lag affect their Canada Sevens tournament, despite an over 30-hour travel from Cape Town, 4th on the overall standings, and having finished 5th in Perth last month. The Blitzbok talisman Roscoe Speckman says he's keen to make his impact felt when he returns for the Blitzboks in his first Canada Sevens tournament since 2017.
At this age, you just want to play every tournament because you never know when it's your last one. With my age, not getting younger, I make sure every tournament, it's like my first tournament and my last tournament. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of youngsters in camp that's pushing me, and that's the nicest thing. So if I can make the team, it means I'm keeping these youngsters out, and that's the drive that I have still in me.
And finally, tennis. Andy Murray won his first match on an ATP tour since October with victory over Alexander Miller at the Qatar Open. The world number 2 Carlos Alcaraz retired from his Rio Open first round match, and that was due to a right ankle injury. And Stan Wawrinka is out of the Rio Open. He was beat beaten by the Argentina Open champion Facundo Diaz-Costa. We'll bring you more sport on Sunrise. Headlines, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. In the next half hour, we'll speak to the Minister of Land Affairs, Agriculture and Rural Development, Toko Didiza, about the Ingun Yama Trust. You with SAFM leading the conversation. No load shedding for now. Stage 2 later, 7:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, analysts say the government's finances will remain constrained as the country's economy grows below 1%. They say the persistent shortages of electricity and constraint of the country's ports and rail are undermining economic growth amidst the external pressures. The ANC says it's ready for the battle at the polls, which will start in earnest with the launch of the party's election manifesto at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban this weekend. President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday proclaimed May 29th as the election date. And the legal analyst expects the pre-trial conference today in the murderer and rapist Thabo Beste's prison escape case to be short. This is due to accused number 9, Zimbabwe national Zanda Moyo's legal representative, withdrawing from the case. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
One of the biggest delays around Gauteng this morning is the run on the Mabopane Highway coming into Eskia Patlali. No lights there at the end. There is a power supply problem around the parts of Trinity this morning, and that seems to be one of the, if not the major junction that's affected. So from sort of Van der Park area, all the way down through the bend onto Eskia, that R80 absolutely chock-a-block. Straight through the middle of Pretoria, Paul Kruger's heavy through Capital Park, and there's a backlog coming in on the N4 from Watermeyer Street down towards the N1. Now, if you're heading into the airport for flight connections using the R20, and you're driving from Pretoria, it's a backlog and a half around a stationary vehicle that's blocking 2 lanes going down to Atlas Road. Traffic is parking back through Pomona and back towards the R23 Benoni exit. Also, a crash coming out of Benoni this morning on the N12 near Tom Jones Street. So traffic there pushing back towards the Snake Road off-ramp. Heading out of Durban towards Pinetown. This is a new phenomenon, but it's happening on a regular basis, almost a daily morning and afternoon basis. Now, breakdowns in the roadworks between Spaghetti Junction and Paradise Valley this morning is Pinetown bound. Just before Paradise Valley, the backlog of the queue heavy back past Pavilion Mall. M7 onto Bel Air and Wakesley coming from Queensborough, very heavy as well today. Cape Town area, lots of traffic jamming up on the R44 through Annandale Road, Jamestown and into central Stellenbosch. If you're leaving Somerset Western destination Stellenbosch, it's a very busy 44 this morning. The rest of the highway networks are fairly busy, including a truck crash on the ramp to the N1 coming off Plattercliff Road on ramping to the N1 inbound, and some road closures are in place already around City Hall for today's budget speech event, and that is going to cause some localised congestion inside the Cape Town CBD. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray McClark, good morning again. Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, it is markets in Hong Kong and China that are leading with gains. Investors are responding to the decision by China's central bank to cut interest rates on home loans. China's central bank has cut interest rates to boost the country's struggling property market and the economy. So in Asian markets, China's Shanghai Composite is up 2.2%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng is up 3%, and Japan's Nikkei is down 0.3% before the US market opens later today. The US futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones and S&P futures are each down 0.2%, and in the local market, the JSE, that was down 0.9% yesterday. The shares of telecommunications and mining companies were down.
And Kumba Iron Ore, another mining company, announcing job cuts.
Yeah, Kumba Iron Ore has announced that 490 of its workers might lose their jobs, and Kumba's contracts with service providers were also being reviewed. This is all aimed at cutting Kumba Iron Ore's costs by up to 2.5 billion rand. Kumba Iron Ore is the latest mining company to announce job cuts. Earlier this week, Anglo American Platinum announced that it has started a retrenchment process that might affect up to 3,700 jobs. Kumba, Anglo-American Platinum, and the broader mining industry are facing lower profits and production levels due to the dysfunction at Transnet. In fact, for the looming job losses, Kumba has blamed inefficiencies with Transnet's freight rail system.
And then We Buy Cars, they want to double their share of the second-hand vehicle market.
Yeah, We Buy Cars is in the process of being listed on the JSE to be a publicly owned company. It has now announced its growth plans. We Buy Cars wants to almost double its share of the second-hand vehicle market in South Africa by 2028. So it wants to grow its market share from 12% currently to 23%. Between now and 2028, We Buy Cars will have to sell a lot of vehicles at a time when consumers are not purchasing vehicles due to financial pressures.
Ray Machlaka, thank you. Ray, of course, back tomorrow. He'll have more on the budget tomorrow, more on the budget through the day here on SFM. 24 minutes to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Let's go to Churchill in Mthatha. Churchill, it's been a while. The elections, 29th of May. Good morning.
Good morning, my brother. There's a guy who called in here and saying that the ANC liberated this country and the ANC is doing well. They can't wait to vote.
From Zile, yeah.
And I wanted to ask, which ANC is he actually referring to that liberated this country? Because in my view, there were many organizations that were involved in fighting for the liberation of this country, even ordinary South Africans, in the international community and so on. But he talks as if he's talking to the grannies in the village. Also, once more, this guy talks about, he doesn't know that the future of this country is coalition. In fact, when you talk about that MK party, that MK party is going to unseat the ANC in the case, which is a strong hold for the ANC.
That's a big thing to say, Churchill.
You put your ear on the ground. Obviously, the votes are going to go even to other political parties, but that province, which is KZN, has been a stronghold of the ANC. And obviously, JZ has got a strong following there.
Yeah.
But also, he also goes on to say, even in the DA-run municipalities, there are potholes. Okay, fine, there might be potholes, but it's a fact that the municipalities that are run by the DA are doing quite better than those that are run by the ANC. We know that. Let's look at the stats in as far as unemployment is concerned. There's an exodus of people to the Western Cape.
Yeah.
That's the province that has created employment. No, he must go to the stats. In fact, yes, the ANC started well, but the ANC has actually been going down and down and down in as far as the government of this country. In fact, in my view, President Ramaphosa is the worst performing president in the ANC. That's my view.
Sure.
It has actually not done well. It started well, but things are becoming worse and worse and worse in this country.
All right, Churchill on the line from Mthatha. Strong criticism there. I did wonder if Phumzile's call would spark a reaction in some way. Coco in Johannesburg. Hi, Coco.
Hi, Stephen. I just want to comment on, the budget that we have that will be delivered today.
Yeah.
And also just the unemployment. As a young person, I think, I felt the need to just call today. I think it's very unfortunate for South Africa to have almost 50% of young people unemployed. And I think also tying it back to what's going to be delivered today, it's also very unfortunate that, our country is in a state where we're trying to scramble for funds, but also, our debt is also growing, and we have unemployment that's also rising. So the question is, who's going to pay all that in the future? Because the unemployment is high now. And I know that, with the privileged young people, they get to leave South Africa. So, the tax bracket is going to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink until when? And but also, I think, we should also give props to where it's, we have some programs that actually help unemployed young people. I'm in the financial sector, and, I've seen the likes of Bank Sita, which try to connect young people to opportunities, also the likes of Asisa. But the thing is, it's not everywhere. I have friends who have degrees in sciences and they're not employed.
Yeah.
So it's really unfortunate that, we in the state as a country that has so much potential, and it's really saddening.
No, it is, Coco. I mean, I think people despair. I think young people despair. I think their parents must despair for them. I mean, the whole thing is awful.
But we have to make a choice, right?
Yeah.
The power is in our hands on the 29th of May, so we have to go out there and fend for ourselves. But that's all, Stephen.
All right, Coco on the line from Johannesburg. Thank you. A Gift on the line from the Eastern Cape. I must warn you, Gift is a spokesperson for the Eastern Cape. Gift, hi. The elections, you ready?
Yes, of course, we are ready, Stephen. Look, Stephen, I just want to speak about my expectations on the budget speech, but quickly before I go that, let me just quickly, in 30 seconds, respond to Churchill. The guy Pumzile from, I think from Kocha has got every right to express his views on what the ANC is performing in the country, and for a mere fact that we were here before 1994, and some of us are victims of apartheid. So he must understand that he has got every right, and he's got every right to vote for the ANC, because if you go to Western Cape, there are two worlds in the Western Cape. There's a black world and a white world. You must just go to Khayelitsha, must go to Nyanga, must go to Guguletu and see the dire conditions that our people are living in. But quickly go back to the budget speech. I think, Stephen, one of the things that I think the minister must speak about is the issue of the DORA, your revenue, that is normally allocated to municipalities in different provinces. And the Eastern Cape is one of those provinces that normally receive less money on DORA funding. I expect the minister just to increase that funding so that we can assist our struggling municipalities. But also I expect the minister to announce a massive expansion of the presidential employment stimulus, just to accommodate more than 1 million young people, to have the break of the unemployment in the country. But I also expect the minister to introduce a massive package of interventions, including debt relief for Transnet, because you know that Transnet has been struggling so that they can save those thousands of jobs that are at risk. Thirdly, I expect the minister to introduce urgent interventions to stabilize some of the SOEs that include Metro Rail, your DNL, and Post Office. It's in particular Post Office, because we know for a fact that there are many branches of Post Office that have been closed around the country, and this is the main source of intervention that I think is going to be critical. Lastly, Stephen, I expect also the minister to introduce a stabilization package for local government, including assisting those struggling 36 municipalities in the country that are failing to pay staff salaries, and also to provide them quality services. These are the expectations that I expect the minister.
All right, Gift, thank you. All right, that Gift is a spokesperson in the Eastern Cape, and I mean, I don't think anyone's saying that that Churchill or Pumzile, who started all of this, are not allowed to say what they want to say. But interesting to get different responses. I don't know if we're going to see those kinds of big interventions from the Finance Minister. We keep coming back to this. Where's the money going to come from? 18 minutes to 8.
Good day. I'm Madidaba Wasichaba, and these are your top stories. Reports state that SAMA award-winning, platinum-selling artist Vusi Nova is planning to get his lick back and tell his side of the story. After years of getting vilified by the media and becoming a victim of cancel culture, the star is ready to show the world who he is beyond the name and the fame, proving why Angeke Baskone as Mzansi gets to see him unapologetic, uncut and unprovoked. For more on this, catch Vusi Nova Unprovoked starting on the 2nd of March on SABC 1. I'm Madidaba Wasichaba.
Golden Arrows and TS Galaxy have a huge disagreement on who gets to play in the next round of the Cup of Dreams. Abafana Bestende clashes with the Rockets. This is the Nedbank Cup round of 32. Golden Arrows versus TS Galaxy on Friday, 23 February at 6:30 p.m. Live on SABC Plus and SABC radio stations. Also available on sabcsport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
16 minutes to 8. Good morning. Well, a statement yesterday from the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Toko Dudiza, that the Amazulu King, Msizulu Kazwelithini, does have the right to remove the chair of the board of the Inganyama Trust. The minister also says King Msizulu can be the chair of the trust himself. He said he'll be taking over as chair. He is the sole trustee of the trust, which controls roughly around 1/3 of the land in KwaZulu-Natal. Well, Minister Toko Dudiza is on the line for you now. Minister, good morning, and thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning to you, Stephen, and your listeners.
I think most of us were surprised when the King removed Thanduyise Mzimela as chair of the Inganyama Trust and appointed himself. I don't think anything like this has sort of happened before. Were you a little caught by surprise?
Well, I must say that I was caught by surprise that the person had not even finished a year being in office. And you would recall, Stephen, that these rumors started around September. And unfortunately, at the time, we didn't receive any letter or communication from the King to that effect. And you would also recall that the spokesperson then had rebutted that letter and indicated that it was fake. So we did not, take that into consideration. So when we received the letter now from the Prime Minister of the Zulu King indicating that he's recalling Inkosi Thanduyise Mzimela, we were a bit taken aback. But obviously, as his nominee, it is within his right to decide who he appoints as the nominee, who will then be the chair of the board, as the Act says, that he can chair the board himself or appoint a nominee.
Okay. Are you a little worried when things like this happen and, we're all surprised? Do you worry a little bit about something else is going on? I mean, do you worry a bit about the stability of the trust?
I must say that what has occasioned our statement is because it is indeed unsettling for a number of people, even in society. The beneficiaries of the Ingonyama Trust, who are really the communities whose land are under the administration of the trust, and there had been a lot of communication publicly by some of the analysts and normal individuals who were just concerned as to what is happening and isn't this causing some instability. And it was therefore important for myself as the minister responsible to actually issue a statement to just reassure people that the institution is functional, despite that the chairperson who has been installed by the King has been now recalled, and that he is taking over the function of being the board chair himself.
You say in your statement that the Trust must still implement the judgment in the case brought by KSAC, and that ruling, as I understand it, said the Trust could no longer demand that people pay the Ingonyama Trust money to stay on land that they already have a right to occupy. In other words, people living there have a right to occupy that land. The Trust had been insisting they pay to use the land. As I understand it, you'll know it better than I, Minister, the court ruled the Trust cannot insist on being paid. What are you expecting the Trust to do?
You'd recall even after the judgment that I indicated publicly that I had written to the board to indicate that the board must comply with the judgment of the case between Ingonyama Trust and KSAC. And you recall that KSAC was actually representing community members from the land which is under Ingonyama Trust. And rightfully so, the judge did rule that such leases must not be paid. Leases that are paid in any communal area where there is a need for development, where a community may want to partner either with the private sector or even allow government to build government facilities in their land, there are processes that are being followed where communities get consulted and, they would agree. So those processes in terms of commercial activity in the Ingonyama Trust, whether building a garage or a mall, those will still continue. And in those instances, leases are paid to for the benefit of those communities. Communities become the preferred, ones for employment opportunities. Those people just find the job.
Minister, I'm sorry, we're losing you on that line. I'm just going to ask you to move around a little bit so we can hear you. Yeah. Minister, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, sorry. I'm just going to ask you to repeat that last part. We lost you on the line there for a second.
Oh, okay. No, I was saying the judge was correct that people should not pay for staying on Ingonyama land because they've got the land rights in those lands like anybody else. And you have got the IPILRA, which is the Informal Protection of Land Rights. You have got ULTRA, which is the upgrading of informal land rights. So those people have got full rights like anybody else. The fact that you may not have title on Ingonyama Trust land does not mean you don't have rights to land.
Do you know, I presume then that some people would have paid the money over to the Ingonyama Trust. Is the trust refunding that money? Could it even be demanding some people pay money now?
That's the process where the court said those monies that have been paid by residents for their own, residential property staying in Ingonyama Trust, those must be paid back to individuals. You would appreciate that the then chairperson and the board decided to take the matter up to the Supreme Court for appeal. We are awaiting the judgment of that matter. But as a minister, I had entrusted upon the board that they must comply with the judgment. And I still believe it is important to do so.
Minister, thank you very much indeed for the time. Toko Didiza is the Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, as you know, watching that situation around the Ingonyama Trust very closely. 9 minutes to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
I'd be pleased to note if you got caught up in the carnage yesterday on the N1 through Midrand, it's actually moving okay this morning. A little bit lighter perhaps than normal. No major obstructions and just a little bit of congestion moving through from Old Joburg Road down towards the New Road exit, but that is completely normal. A couple of issues east of Joburg this morning. The R21 towards the airport's heavy. There's a breakdown before Atlas Road. The traffic's all the way back through to the R23 Benoni exit. That's a problem if you're on route for flight connections. Earlier crash at Benoni on the N12 coming through from Snake Road to Tom Jones. That has been cleared away. Reminder, Pretoria's Mopbody Highway, no traffic lights at SKM Petheli. It's busy this morning. Very heavy queues from the Theo Martin side. If you're driving out of Durban towards Pavilion and onwards towards Paradise Valley, get used to these queues as the roadworks intensify and you get breakdowns at peak time. It just backs everything up, and that's what we got this morning. A broken down vehicle going into Paradise Valley. Traffic heading out of Pinetown towards Durban, backed heavily passing Pavilion Mall. The M7 from Queensborough down towards Bel Air and to Wakesley looking quite slow as well. A lot of traffic around the Stellenbosch area outside Cape Town this morning. R44 if you're arriving in from Paarl, that's a really big queue. The R44 the other side coming up from Somerset West is very heavy from Jamestown all the way through to the central Stellenbosch area. Highways into Cape Town fairly busy this morning, but no sort of nothing untoward. There is a crash on the Plattekloof Road on-ramp to the N1 inbound, so that's probably going to just snarl up the Plattekloof Road. And the N1 going into town is reasonably busy. Queues right the way through to the elevated freeway, and a lot of closures in central Cape Town for the budget speech event at City Hall. So you've got routes like Tennant and Darling Street coming in and going out of the CBD, which will be closed for the remainder of the day. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mzansi's third-tier league outfit, the Lions of the North, can't wait to show Sekhukhune United how they roar to the last 16. But Babina Noko, this is the Nedbank Cup round of 32. Highlands Park versus Sekhukhune United on Wednesday, 21 February at 6:30 p.m. Live on SABC Plus and SABC radio stations. Also available on sabcsport.com. # We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Free State Provincial Government, under the leadership of Premier Mxolisi Dukwana, will host the much-anticipated Free State Investment Conference. The conference seeks to promote the province as an investment destination through showcasing strategic investment projects. Do join us on the 27th of February 2024 at the University of the Free State's main campus in Bloemfontein. The Free State Provincial Government, harnessing partnerships, stimulating growth and development through investment.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
6 minutes now to 8 the time. You know the number 086 000 2032. Last week we spoke to a spokesperson for the South African National Defence Force, for the Ministry, the Ministry of Defence, who pointed out, Sapiwa Dlamini I think it was, who pointed out that they are hoping, they are expecting perhaps some kind of announcement in the budget today around the South African National Defence Force, which, as you know, is in the DRC, and particularly around attack helicopters, the Royal Falk helicopters. Now, our soldiers are being deployed to sort of protect people against some of the rebel militia groups there, including the M23. Everyone has told us how important the Royal Falks are. None of them are flying at the moment. There's no other place that we can get attack helicopters from, it would appear. Darren Olivier is a military expert and director at African Defence Review. Darren, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning.
We know that attack helicopters are absolutely vital. I don't know if the minister is going to announce any kind of more money for the Defence Force. I don't know where he would get the money from. But I presume without more money, we can't use the Royal Falk. And without the Royal Falk, our people in the DRC are going to be under extreme pressure.
Yes, certainly. More money would be a great thing, obviously. We'd hope for it. But even if money is granted, it'll take some time for this to be corrected. One of the main reasons for the Royal Falk fleet being unavailable so much is that the SAF does not currently have a contract with the NEL for support. There's currently a dispute regarding how to fund that. So even if money is provided, let's say, in this budget speech, it'll take months and months for there to be a recovery in the numbers of Royal Falks. That means that effectively the troops there are entirely dependent on either the DRC military's aircraft, or hopefully one of the other countries inside that might be able to provide their own aircraft, but that seems unlikely right now.
We know that, and the claim is that Rwanda has been arming the M23. The M23 actually have carried out drone attacks. There's been a report that one of their surface-to-air missiles actually took out a UN drone. And yet we know that government has made this decision to deploy our soldiers to the DRC. You suggest we actually need a big public debate about this. What kind of discussion do you think we need to have?
Well, yes, I think the first thing to understand is, as you said, M23 is supported by a nation state. It is well equipped. It has modern equipment like drones, and for which the SANDF does not currently have counter-drone equipment. Most militaries don't. It's a whole new ballgame out there. It has surface-to-air missiles. Most of the Air Force's aircraft do not have adequate defenses against that because, again, my budget cuts. And effectively, this has all the hallmarks of turning into a regional war all over again. Now, the force that's been deployed is relatively small. It's relatively under-equipped. And one has to ask the question of whether it is wise to send a force this small and this poorly supported, given the stakes and given the risks, and whether it might not have been better in this case to go for diplomacy. So I do think, and at the same time, the SA government has been relatively coy in terms of information around its deployment. It certainly hasn't given the same level of information, justification, and guidance as it has before. And therefore, I think there is a need for more transparency and at least more of a public debate as to when and where and why and how do we send the SANDF into harm's way, and what do we require in terms of risk levels before doing so.
And I suppose, you talk about diplomacy. From what I understand, this sort of dispute between the DRC and Rwanda, if we can call it that, I think we can. Then we've got, people who make money out of the minerals in the area. This has been going on for a long time. Very difficult to manage diplomatically unless you get security on the ground first, which is sort of kind of what this whole deployment is supposed to do.
Yes, absolutely. But then it should be larger and better supported. And that should be rolled out, I think, before the deployment happens. In terms of strategy, this makes sense. It makes sense for SADC to be supporting the DRC. It makes sense to be trying to obtain some security on the ground, as happened back in 2013 when the FIB, then attached to the UN peacekeeping mission, managed to roll back M23 and then force all parties, back to negotiating. So from that point of view, absolutely it makes sense. But I think we need to bear in mind that M23 is, again, not exactly the same as it was back then. It is well equipped. And you have to be serious if you want to have a role in pushing them back, as was done, 10 years ago. SADC is a fairly big group. There's certainly more to it. It can deploy more than just a brigade, which is what's been deployed at the moment. Therefore, I think we also need to ask serious questions about, what's happening with the rest of SADC? what support is being provided, for example, by Angola, by Botswana, and all the rest. This is a very serious issue. It's a very worrying issue. And yes, we certainly have an interest in ensuring security, but the means by which it's being done is very important.
Okay, so if we have a South African force in the DRC that is not strong enough, what's likely to happen is more attacks like we saw on our soldiers get killed. And then in a democracy, people will say, well, why are our soldiers there in the first place? Domestic pressure will sort of grow for them to come home. And that means that civilians in the DRC are in a much more vulnerable position, and Rwanda gets what they want.
Yes, I mean, something else to bear in mind in the context is that there were two other forces in the DRC that have now, or are in the process of leaving, or have already left. One was the East African Standby Force, which effectively this force is replacing. The other, of course, is the UN mission itself. So with those two gone, and this force being relatively small, you have relatively fewer resources available, not just to counter rebels, but just as a means of protection in certain areas for people who are vulnerable, people who are displaced, and all the rest. So given that, and given how, to be clear, I'm not saying this will go terribly. I'm saying the risk is very high, and I don't believe the risk has been adequately handled. So if that goes as badly as it might go, as it went back in 2013 initially, then yes, people are far worse off.
Darren Oliver, thank you. Military expert and director at African Defence Review. You with SFM leading the conversation. It's 8 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, analysts continue to throw the bones ahead of Finance Minister's budget speech and the governing party ready to defend its seat in governance. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. Analysts say the government finances will remain constrained as the country's economy grows below 1%. They say persistent shortages of electricity and constraints of the country's ports and rail are undermining economic growth in the midst of external pressures. The International Monetary Fund revised South Africa's growth downwards to 1% due to these domestic challenges. The Reserve Bank has also projected growth of 1.2% this year. Economist Hannah Marai says infrastructure investments required to grow the economy and create jobs should be around 30% of GDP. However, Marai says it's currently at only 15%.
Staying on the expenditure side, I think we talk about creating jobs and what we need to do to grow the economy. I think we know exactly what we need to do. And one of the fundamental building blocks beyond, solving for things like load shedding, solving for our ports and our, railway and broader logistics crisis is investment in broad infrastructure, gross fixed capital formation. If we look at, the previous budget, it is noted as a priority.
Another economist, Billy Joubert, says the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, will struggle with balancing limited revenue collection against various competing spending priorities on the backdrop of what is expected to be a highly contested election when he delivers his budget speech today. He'll attempt to include raising new taxes in the region of 15 billion rand, which he announced during the midterm budget in November last year. Raising additional taxes by increasing value-added tax or personal income is viewed as the most effective way. However, it is not an ideal option for taxpayers who are already burdened with the high cost of living. Joubert says there are no low-hanging fruits where tax is concerned.
The easiest way to raise more money is to push up the VAT rate. That's highly unlikely to happen in an election year, if ever. Possibly, we talk about the NHI, given that the NHI is very much a social initiative, possibly it could be seen to justify in the future, an increase in the VAT rate, because it's essentially, one way of moving the dial very quickly. But I certainly don't foresee that happening anytime soon. So I think what we'll be seeing is a continued focus on enforcement. So I don't think there's any low-hanging fruit in terms of, changing the tax system.
To the story now, the ANC says it's ready for the battle at the polls, which will start in earnest with the launch of the party's election manifesto at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban this weekend. President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday proclaimed May 29th as the election date. The ANC has called on all South Africans to vote. The party's head of elections, Mdumiseni Nduli.
We started laying the foundation early last year when we were conducting the assessment of our election machinery throughout the country. and strengthening areas where there were certain challenges which were identified. We are now at a point where we have assembled the best available team to lead and to coordinate the election campaign in different parts of our country and in all our 9 provinces. So we are ready, we are prepared. And when the President communicated the date, all that came to our minds was that the battle begins and Maihlome, let's go forward.
The SADC Electoral Advisory Council has arrived in South Africa to assess the country's state of readiness for the upcoming general elections. Yesterday, President Cyril Ramaphosa proclaimed May 29th as the date of the elections. The council's chairperson, Advocate Nothemba Chipweja, has told SABC News that they will engage different stakeholders leading up to the elections.
We're here for a pre-election assessment mission to assess the readiness of South Africa for the upcoming elections. And during our assessment, we'll be considering the political and security environment in the country to assess whether it is conducive for the holding of credible and free elections. We are also looking at the legal framework, and importantly, we are also looking at the aspect of the IEC and their preparedness to conduct the upcoming elections.
And finally, a legal analyst expects the pre-trial conference today in murderer and rapist Thabo Beste's prison escape case to be short. This is due to accused number 9, Zimbabwean national Zanda Moyo's legal representative withdrawing from the case. It is going to be the first time Beste, his lover, Dr. Nandi Pamakutumana, and 7 others appear together in the Free State High Court in Bloemfontein. The accused face charges of aiding and abetting Beste to escape unlawful custody, violation of a dead body, fraud, corruption and arson. Dikeledi Muyedi is a legal analyst.
One of the accused, I think it's Mr. Moyo, the attorney has withdrawn from representing him. Therefore, tomorrow he'll be given a chance whether he's going to appoint a legal attorney of private or going to go to the state, or he'll represent himself. And then how long he's going to take for him to come with those results. And once he has the attorney, and then the matter is going to be postponed for the attorney to be available for the day.
Recapping your top story, analysts say the government's finances will remain constrained as the country's economy grows below 1%. This is ahead of the finance minister delivering his budget speech this afternoon. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 8:30.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. Soccer, the 2025 AFCON is set to clash with the expanded FIFA Club World Cup, and rugby, the Stormers prop, Neethling Forshire, delighted to be included in the Springbok alignment camp. Let's find out more just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. A bit of hassle now around the William Mandela off-ramp from the N1 south and north. There's a crashing before you get to William Mandela going north, so from Randburg it's heavy. And there's a collision scene on the N1 south before William Mandela, so coming from Rivonia it's bad going south, but the very heavy backlog is on the northbound side out of Randburg today. If you're driving into Sandton, there's a lot of pressure. Peter Place onto William Mandela, down onto Sandton, drive into Parkmore. There's a crash on the Mike 1 north near Empire Road, so traffic very slow coming through the Crown from Boysons. Behind that, the M2 is heavy through from the Benrose side as well. Durban, the M7 towards the Bluff, that's jammed again this morning, down towards the Bel Air and Wakesley Road junction. Cape Town side, the N1 inbound, fairly busy. Plattercliff Hill right through to the city centre area. There is a bit of traffic that's just started to build up as well on the N7 north. If you're leaving Goodwood, queues from about sort of Milton Street all the way through towards the Bosmansdam off-ramp. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
8:08, good morning with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. We've seen really what seems almost like an explosion in teenage pregnancies in the last couple of years. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The city of Cape Town saying, for example, they believe contraception use, the use of contraceptions, down by around 30%. That's a huge figure. And why is that? Surely, there's more contraception, more freely available than anywhere before. Maybe, I don't know, has there been a supply problem? Something like that. We'll talk about that in the next little while. We've talked about cryptocurrencies and EFT NFTs and all of that stuff, blockchain, in a little while too. As you know, I don't understand how all of this works, so we'll ask our guest to use small words. And then your mediated conversation coming up in a little while. Quite looking forward to it, actually. You'll talk about schools and what happened at Primrose Hill Primary School, where this 13-year-old shot his principal. And how it was planned. One of the questions and one of the things we're asking one of our experts to talk about is when you should look at your child's cell phone and when you shouldn't. I mean, in this case, this 13-year-old was discussing planning it on a WhatsApp group. So when should you be looking at your child's cell phone? Part of that conversation with SAFM 9 after 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Let's start in Gqeberha, Malunga. Hi. You heard that conversation around the conflict in the DRC. What do you think about it?
Yes, Stephen, the conflict in DRC is something that we have to be very careful when we're calling the commentators. So this Rwanda is attacking Congo, and then we're folding our hands, and almost 7 million people are dead. And you will see people coming with agenda of justifying and condemning what the South African government is doing, but we don't show the positive. This is Western agenda and comment, and Western are benefiting from this mineral looting. South Africa is doing one of the best things that can be done in Africa by supporting the Congo. They are not alone there. Angola have sent the troops, and Zambia have sent the troops as well. So when we're condemning South Africa, this is really unfair that we can really sit back and think that the government has no clue of what they're doing. The commander-in-chief have sent people, and they're supporting the army in Congo. The army in Congo is there, but due to logistical problems and corruption, because of there is so much infiltration in the government when the Mzee Kabila came, and many Rwandese are in the Congolese army. They are in there, they're occupying big posts, and there's so much corruption that they do not fight. They tend to side with these rebels, and then they give them advantages of advancing. So when South Africa is in there, they're helping out in, first of all, it's a moral uplifting for the soldiers in Congo, and it's helping. The fruits are paying.
So you believe that South Africa is doing... Okay, so Malunga, South Africa is doing the right thing.
South Africa is doing the right thing right now, and there's now ground. The Congolese army plus these forces are doing a ground now. They're actually taking some of these territories that were taken. We're not talking about that. The positive results that are coming out of this. And Rwanda is getting now scared of what is happening now. Congo is no longer alone. Now the other countries are supporting this. This thing needs to stop. Okay. South Africa has mines in Congo. There are mines in Congo. There are Western powers, and Western people have mines in Congo. They are exploiting this by creating conflict. The minerals are cheap. They're stealing it, actually.
All right, Malunga, thank you. On the line from Gqeberha, he believes doing the right thing. I think interesting points there, and we had a mediated conversation about this. It is very complicated. Billy in Limpopo, hi, the Ingonyama Trust. Good morning.
How are you?
All right, go for it.
The Constitution of South Africa states in Section 3, citizenship. There is common South African citizenship. All citizens are equally entitled to rights, privileges, and the benefit of citizenship.
Yeah.
And equally subject to the duties and responsibilities of citizenship. We don't have a citizenship called Zulu.
Yeah.
We are South African citizens. And therefore, we are all entitled to the land in KZN. There's no land reserved for Zulu, which must be managed by a Zulu monarch. Because courts have pronounced themselves that this traditional and poison act is actually unconstitutional. It must be repealed. The Ngonyama Trust itself must be repealed. We've got two kingdoms around South Africa. That is Eswatini and Lesotho. And they're outside this country. They are not governed by our constitution. The Ngonyama Trust is an illegal trust. The minister must just repeal it and stop to tell us things which are not constitutional. She herself, in contravention of the law of this country and the Constitution.
So, Billy, for you, the Ingonyama Trust, I mean, the last act, I think it was, signed by the sort of whites-only Parliament in 1994, just before the election. You reckon it's unconstitutional?
It is unconstitutional.
Okay.
It was a way of losing the ISP to get
them in the elections. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
It was not a legitimate trust. The minister is the sole trustee of land,
All right.
not chief.
Billy in Limpopo, thank you. Just two things on that, and just while Billy's sort of, talking, I sort of reminded Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi before he passed, said many times that it was not a sort of bribe to get him into the elections. That's what he said, at least. And then the other thing is, I remember a call, I can't remember who it was, but was a person who identified themselves as a white person. They were in Northwest, and he said he actually had gone to a local traditional leader and asked if he could have a piece of land to live on, and the traditional leader had said yes, even though he wasn't from the same group as the traditional leader. So, it's interesting to see how this is managed. And I think that does happen in many cases. You don't actually have to be from the group. You have to go and speak to the leader and manage it from there. I'm sure there are other cases like that, but I remember that. 8:15.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, we know over the last few years there's been a big increase in the number of teenage women falling pregnant. Perhaps more worrying than all of that, it seems there's a decrease in the use of contraceptives. Dr. Marion Stevens is on the Gender Advisory Panel at the World Health Organization, also founding director of the SRJC. Dr. Stevens, good morning, and thank you very much indeed for your time.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning to your listeners.
When we see teenage pregnancies and the use going up and the use of contraception going down, and it seems to be happening quite dramatically, not just in Cape Town but in other places, do we know what causes this to happen?
So, Stephen, we've had these conversations before with quite a lot of regularity, and I think we need to kind of go back to kind of basics and look at our history and where we've come from. And we've come from a context where we've had population control, where we haven't had a kind of even lens and ideas about what we're doing around fertility. So young Black women's fertility has been questioned and undermined in so many ways. And if you look at what's in the cupboard of contraceptive clinics, we still really only have the apartheid long-acting contraceptive Depo-Provera, even though our contraception guidelines talk to a range of methods that you would find in the private sector, like the pill and the patch and the ring. What seems to have happened is we've had a donor-led approach, essentially taking on what the donors want, which is to have long-acting contraceptive options, which essentially don't trust adolescents and say, we don't trust you, we were giving you this recipe and you have to come back in 5 years or 3 months or whatever for the next option. And so it's a recipe for actually not listening and understanding where young kids are. And the other reality is we have endemic sexual violence, and we're not putting the two together. And then we're not putting the three together because we don't actually have an ability to impart life orientation without taking along parents and life orientation teachers who are skilled enough to deal with the traumas that our society has inherited. So we have life orientation teachers who are trying their best to impart information about their kids' bodies, where things begin and end. And it's really, really very hard because they're not supported. They have to deal with kids who are experiencing sexual abuse. There's very little recourse in services to be able to address this. And then lastly, if young teenagers want to choose to have an abortion, we are not implementing services. We're not training health providers to provide those options. There are public-private partnerships with groups like Mari Stopes taking over these services, completely denuding all our local public services. And so we don't have great sexual and reproductive health services. What we do have is fantastic providers, and we have fantastic managers in the province and in the country, but they're not supported by the health system, by management, and by systems that provide reproductive health commodities.
Dr. Stevens, so, I mean, is there a sort of... I understand the practical problem, and I can imagine officials saying, look, we want to, we're being forced in a situation where people are being given what's available, not what they should really be given, and so they lose choice. Is there a sort of attitude, or maybe the word's conservatism, that's holding things back, or is it really a resource problem?
I think it's both, Stephen. I think you've probably hit the nail on the head, because we haven't really had discussions and opened up. Our healthcare providers, while they're trying very hard, there is no sexual and reproductive health course that's provided to nurses or doctors through their training. They're not trained to do the range of contraception options that are available. It's something that happens post-qualification if they choose to do that. And the other reality is that our reproductive health commodity budget is essentially a donor budget, and we're not putting the national fiscus in. And so if we're talking about the issues of decolonization or about transformation in South Africa, what we're doing is we're focusing on other issues, and we're not actually putting money into choices and options for young black women.
If we don't change anything, we're just going to repeat the same situation again and again.
Precisely.
Dr. Marion Stevens, thank you. From the Gender Advisory Panel at the World Health Organization, outgoing founding director of the SRJC. 20 minutes after 8.
Keeping up with your TV license balance inquiries is now simpler than ever. No more waiting in queues, no more phone calls. Just SMS your ID or TV license account number to 44210 and secure your legal viewing fast and simple. Standard SMS rates will be charged. Terms and conditions apply. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Good day. I'm Madidaba Wasichaba, and these are your top stories. Reports state that SAMA award-winning, platinum-selling artist Vusi Nova is planning to get his leg back and tell his side of the story. After years of getting vilified by the media and becoming a victim of cancel culture, the star is ready to show the world who he is beyond the name and the fame, proving why Angeke Baskone as Mzansi gets to see him unapologetic, uncut and unprovoked. For more on this, catch Vusi Nova Unprovoked starting on the 2nd of March on SABC 1. I'm Madidaba Wasichaba.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
21 minutes after 8 the time. Good morning, you with SFM. Lots going on this morning. As of course you know, people have been talking about the election date. Now we know the 29th of May this year is when we'll be going to vote. I don't know how much time you've spent looking at cryptocurrencies and things like that. Lots of people have been talking about blockchain, and it seems easier and easier to actually invest in these. At the same time, I find it difficult to invest in something I don't fully understand. Wihan Ulafir is a partner in fintech and digital asset lead at Mazars in South Africa. Wihan, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me this morning.
There's a lot of jargon in all of this, Wihan, so I'm going to ask you to use very short words, please, to explain this. But from what I can see, there seems to be a bit more of a trend to make it easier, and this is through regulations, through stock exchanges, to actually invest in Bitcoin and blockchain. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, so that's exactly what's been happening. Over the past couple of years, one was able to invest in blockchain-based digital assets such as Bitcoin, through the utilization of virtual asset service providers or cryptocurrency exchanges, as we refer to them. And of course, the industry has mostly been unregulated in South Africa for quite some time now, with the FSCA, the FIC and the FIS Act introducing regulations at the end of last year, or let's say towards the start of last year rather. So therefore, the regulations are coming to the industry in South Africa. But essentially what we've seen is this is for retail investors particularly, but for commercial investors such as banks and big investment funds and those types of vehicles aren't necessarily able to directly invest into cryptocurrency exchanges or through cryptocurrency exchanges rather into the asset class itself, which created this need for a more regulated and structured type of vehicle, and therefore ETF actually, or exchange traded funds as we call them, essentially creates this vehicle that's needed to create to get exposure through these funds to blockchain-based digital assets such as Bitcoin.
It's easy to get sort of confused about what we're talking about, but I mean, if you look at some of the headlines, cryptocurrencies crashed. There was the big crypto exchange FTX that had a big crash in 2022. Yep. I mean, the price of Bitcoin went, I think it was $46,000 all the way down to $20,000 US. I mean, I don't know if people would put money into something where that's happened quite recently. Could easily happen again.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think the fact of what happened with FTX is quite something that can be discussed in quite depth in a separate conversation. But that essentially related to corporate fraud that was conducted by the management of FTX and, of course, the SEC dealing with that specific matter as well. In terms of the volatility that you're referring to, blockchain-based digital assets such as Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies out there is an extremely volatile asset class. So on a daily basis, you'll see heavy fluctuations on a day-to-day. And of course, the reasoning for that is because it's the nature and the economics of the asset class itself. It's an asset class that's being traded 24/7 around the world, that's being impacted by various markets and also impacted by various regulations, adding to that element of volatility. Now, of course, a lot of people still believe Bitcoin, for example, to be a store of value, and it's proven itself to be a store of value, irrespective of the volatility being subjected to or being viewed on a daily basis. So therefore, it has some merit to be seen as a investment asset class for people and even organizations to invest in. I mean, if you think back to MicroStrategy, which is a company listed on the Nasdaq in the US, they currently hold, I think, $2.6 billion worth of Bitcoin on their balance sheet as well, specifically for the reason as seeing it as a store of value and hedging themselves against the devaluation of traditional fiat currencies.
To me, and call me conservative, Wihan, but I mean, one of the things about the Rand is that I know who is responsible for keeping up its value, and I know who to blame. I know which individuals they are, and they're at the Reserve Bank, and to an extent, I suppose, they're the people who make financial policy in government. With all of the things that you're talking about, I don't quite know. It seems to be quite confusing to an outsider as to know. I mean, the last crash really seems to have been the result of crookery. And I think trust is one of the big issues here. I understand the sort of science behind it and that no one can really, mess with the system. I appreciate that. But I think trust is a big issue.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, the big thing that gives Bitcoin an advantage above all other cryptocurrencies is the protocol itself has a set of rules, and it's completely distributed as well. So no one is able to manipulate the system in terms of issuing additional coins or circumventing the rules that's been issued and created within the protocol itself. If you're comparing something like Bitcoin to the South African government, of course, there's multiple points of failures and variables that need to be taken into consideration there to determine whether the South African Rand will be a store of value. But Bitcoin in its own can be more compared to that of gold. I mean, it's got exactly the same characteristics of gold in terms of scarcity, divisibility. It can't be counterfeited. It can be used as a medium of exchange. Of course, the price of gold is also volatile. The only benefits that Bitcoin, for example, has is it's electronic. So it essentially is a ledger of scarcity that's recorded and has certain functions in place, including public and private key cryptography, distributed ledger technology, and this consensus mechanism to make sure that the transactions being executed on the blockchain itself is secure. So, I mean, you can send Bitcoin from one wallet to another wallet in a question of 7 to 10 minutes, and essentially you won't be able to do that with gold. So the transferability of the asset class itself has some advantages. Now, of course, I do understand and appreciate the volatility associated with the asset class, but over the longer term, we'll see the asset class being utilized as well as that medium of exchange. As we saw, I mean, I think it was at the start of last year where you can pay actually accepts Bitcoin as a means of payment. And of course, it utilizes the Bitcoin Lightning Network to facilitate that. But I mean, a lot of evolution is going on in the background in terms of the asset class. It's really still in its infancy.
Rian Olivier, thank you. Partner for FinTech and Digital Asset Lead at Mazars. You're with SFM 28 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. 2025 AFCON, bit of a clash maybe?
Yes, it's on a collision course with FIFA's expanded Club World Cup, which is due to take place in North America around the same time. But CAF President Patrice Motsepe has not come out and confirmed the exact dates. However, in principle, it has been agreed to be played. That's the Africa Cup of Nations in July and August next year in Morocco. The last two Africa Cup of Nations were both pushed back from the original dates. The 2021 tournament, hosted by Cameroon, was played in January and February of 2022. And now the most recent edition had initially been planned for June and July, but was rescheduled, and that was over weather concerns. Now, qualifying for 2025 AFCON has yet to begin. A prelim round is due to be played next month. The 2027 Cup of Nations will be jointly hosted by Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania. Meanwhile, Bafana head coach Hugo Broos is determined to resolve the uncertainty surrounding Lyle Foster's availability for South Africa's upcoming international matches. The Burnley striker withdrew from his country's AFCON squad ahead of the tournament, despite subsequently playing full matches for his club in the Premier League. Broos has stated he aimed to engage Foster face-to-face to determine his commitment to representing South Africa. Rugby, the Stormers prop, Neethling Fouchier, is delighted to be included in the next Springbok alignment camp, but says a lot of hard work lies ahead to make the national team. He is one of a quintet of Stormers among the 16 uncapped players in the 43-strong list that will be attending the first of 3 BOK strategic sessions for the 2024 season, taking place in Cape Town in the first week of March. And finally, tennis, the top seed Iga Swiatek of Poland defeated United States of America's Sloane Stephens in straight sets, and that's to make it to the round of 16 at the Dubai Tennis Championship. Swiatek will face Ukraine's Irina Svitolina for a place in the quarterfinals. More sport for you on SFM comes around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. We'll look at the situation around teenagers, when you should look at their cell phone after this murder in this attempted murder, the shooting of a principal by a learner. The principal, of course, did survive. That is what we'll be looking at in the next half hour. You're with SFM 8:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, the former President Jacob Zuma has been dealt another blow in his private prosecution bid against senior state advocate Billy Downer and journalist Karen Mon. This after the Concord unanimously dismissed Zuma's appeal against the enforcement order that halted any action relating to his private prosecution of the two. Analysts say the government's finances will remain constrained as the country's economy grows below 1%. They say the persistent shortages of electricity and constraints in the country's ports and rail are undermining economic growth in the midst of external pressures. And the Biden administration has strongly criticized an Alabama Supreme Court ruling that frozen embryos are children. The White House press secretary said last week's decision would lead to devastating consequences, undermining women's access to reproductive care and to contraception. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Couple of very heavy delays around Joburg now. First up, the N1 North, a collision scene going into the William Mandela off-ramp. Traffic remains heavily backed from Bayers Nordia. There's also a crash on the southbound side before William Mandela, so coming from Randburg, that's heavy. And there's some real hassles getting into Sandton with a collision scene on William Mandela just before you get to the Sandton Drive turning. So that traffic very heavy on the approach to Sandton, backlogging on Peter Place coming out of Bryanston and Republic Road out of Randburg. Those routes into that traffic on William Mandela stay heavy. Crash on the Mike 1 North at Smith Street this morning. Mike 1 and M2 routes moving through Crown. Very heavy. There's also the breakdown and now a collision on the R21 South. All of that happening between the Benoni exit and Atlas Road. So very heavy on that section of the R21. Durban, there's been a taxi overturned on the Umgeta Road inbound near the stadium just by Moses Mabida. That sounds quite a nasty collision if you're inbound coming down from sort of Connaught Bridge territory on Umgana Road approaching Durban Central. That's going to be a problem. The M7 being held to Bel Air and to Wakesley. That is Bluffbound. The problem there is roadworks on Bel Air Road going north up towards Chief Albert Lutuli. And Cape Town, the N1 inbound super heavy this morning from Plattercliff Hill through to the CBD. Behind that, the Kuberg Road and Marine Drive are both quite badly backed up, trying to get in or through that N1 traffic. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
27 minutes now to 9 the time. Time for your mediated conversation this Wednesday morning. On Friday last week, a 13-year-old boy at the Primrose High Primary School in Germiston was told by his principal that he must get his books and go and study. A little while later, when the boy came across the principal again, he took out a gun he had brought to school and shot him. The principal survived. He's now recovering in hospital. The 13-year-old boy was arrested, faces a charge of attempted murder, although I think under the law, the magistrate will now have to decide how to deal with the case because he's so young. It's also been reported that the boy's father has been arrested for failing to properly secure his firearm. Then it emerged that this boy had actually planned the attack and discussed shooting the principal with other learners on a WhatsApp group. As you can imagine, this is all incredibly disturbing. There are some schools in this country that do check students, in some cases even conduct daily searches. I think no one saw this coming at a primary school. So how has the society produced this situation, and why did none of the other learners tell a teacher that that this boy had brought a gun to school? And within that, I suppose, is another question. Should you look at your child's phone, and when do you need to give your child privacy? Well, first this morning, Anela Siswana is a clinical psychologist. Then Shahid Omar is director at the Teddy Bear Foundation. Sarah Hoffman is a digital parenting expert, a social media lawyer, and the co-founder of Clicked. We start then with the clinical psychologist, Anela Siswana. Anela, good morning, and thanks so much for your time.
Good morning, sir.
It must not be normal for a 13-year-old boy to think that he should shoot his principal and to go and find a gun and to actually do it. What could have happened to this child? What could this child have seen that would have made him think this was the right thing to do?
Obviously, there are other factors that we may need to look at, and certainly here, my role and that of an educational psychologist may assist to look at what could be the potential factors that have contributed to that kind of an unusual behavior. And obviously, there is a general sense that a child who displays such level of rage, there could be home underlying issues if you look at this systemically. And what I mean by home underlying issues, there could be likelihood of abuse happening at home. There could be likelihood of neglect. There could be a likelihood of many unusual behaviors at home, and the child then knowing that there is a weapon at the house could be a projection of then wanting to use in his little mind, his power and imagination, because a weapon like a gun, it then shows you a degree or a strong sense of this person's capacity to then cause harm. And obviously, clinically, we would then be looking at what we call signs or symptoms of what we then call conduct disorder in basic terms. That is, this is a child who displays unusual behavioral and emotional issues, which then at the end of the day, this child doesn't have regard for others or any capacity to acknowledge what is then wrongfulness. And so if you then see a 13-year-old shooting an adult, it then displays this strong sense of projection that might be happening between the power dynamics between parents. In this case, could be with the father, but at that time, there's a lot of projection that could have happened. There's a lot of systemic psychosocial disturbances which might then have influenced this child to behave in that particular way.
Is it likely that this child would have experienced violence or seen violence? I mean, the idea didn't just arrive fully formed in their head. This child must have seen things like this.
Certainly. And again, the father here is one that will be able to give a comprehensive understanding as to the circumstances of this, how this child got to be exposed to the weapon. But it certainly shows that there is a degree of exposure because, I mean, children behave and see things and automatically want to try those things out. But the degree and the severity of this act then suggests that the degree of the abuse that might be happening or the exposure of this abuse, there's a sense of it showing signs of lethality, and maybe that's what the father does when he threatens his mother or whoever in the family context. So it does really tell us that there is a greater element of what is happening that is under. So obviously the court would then use certain merits and child assessment for a clinical picture that might tell us what is going on, but certainly social workers getting involved. So it's going to need a whole integrated school approach, social workers, psychologists, and people to really work around these elements that could have played out. I mean, also, if you look at the context of this WhatsApp group that may happen, I mean, in schools now, there is a great trend of school cults where these children are being used by certain spiritual groups for certain things, because children are quite vulnerable in that context. So I don't want to miss that, but it does seem that there is a greater element of an assessment that needs to be done to look at a whole integrated school approach of what is happening in the school.
What I can't quite get my head around is that I know the sort of cartoonish violence, or it's not cartoonish violence anymore, that you see on TV, people with guns shooting them in a particular way. But when you actually pick up a gun, even as an adult, it is very heavy, and it sort of tells you the power that it has because it's so heavy. For a 13-year-old boy, I would have thought that he would be scared of a gun. Didn't seem to have that fear here.
Well, the degree of the child abuse and exposure to violence, I mean, weight at the time and the severity of using a gun doesn't matter. Because this child, chances are there's so much rage, and the rage does not even help the child to cognitively process and have this capacity to really get a sense of what is going on. So in that context, there's a degree of this child seeing himself as omnipotent. It's an act of bravery. It's an act of something that he has seen being displayed. And so the heaviness of the gun at that time, I don't think really mattered because of the internal aggravated stuff that this child is experiencing.
Are there any warning signs that anyone, I mean, I'm not going to blame people for missing these warning signs in this case, but are there warning signs that a child can display if they might be about to commit a crime of violence like this? That maybe their parents or their family or someone else in the community, maybe a teacher, might pick up? Is there anything that you can see that could really show this?
I mean, clinically, we can look at things such as conduct disorder or symptoms that are playing out. And with conduct disorder, you see this child displaying very unusual behavior repeatedly. Some kids, they kill animals. Some kids you see as they wrong others. They don't take cognizance or take full responsibility of their wrongfulness. You see how they continuously cause problems and they don't take accountability for it. You see behavioral problems, you see emotional problems, you see scholastic problems, because there's so much that this child is struggling with, and sometimes they're just looking for attention. But for as long as there's consistent, persistent harm on others or animals, children who ban things, so it's just looking at those clinical presentations, but obviously paying attention to how they interact with other kids. And so you'll see this different clinical presentation that is unusual that will then make a parent or a teacher to pay attention that there must be something going on. And obviously the first point in this context could be a psychologist, could be a social worker, could be a teacher to look at possible ways of dealing with these symptoms as they are presenting and not letting them become something that will be then a bigger diagnosis, which then causes a lot of problems in the life of this child.
Analysis, want to thank you, clinical psychologist. Really appreciate the time. First guest on your mediated conversation this morning in the aftermath of that 13-year-old who planned the shooting of his principal on a WhatsApp group. Shahida Omar is the director at the Teddy Bear Foundation, someone with immense experience in dealing with children and the situation around children. Shahida, Dr. Omar, good morning, and thank you for your time.
Good morning, and thank you.
Obviously, the role of the parents was crucial in all of this. And we talk about parenting in South Africa quite a lot. And I think for many parents, they want to spend more time with their children. They want to give their children more energy. But they just don't have the time or the energy. Is that a problem in our society? Our parents aren't able to have the relationships with their children they want to have.
So I think we need to understand and appreciate, as you said, parents are multitasking all the time. The emotional burden, the physical, the economic, financial burden, but also attending to the child's underlying needs. And, there's a lot of issues that children deal with on a daily basis, and engaging with other children. And we need to look at this from a systemic approach, because who are children exposed to? We know children are mirroring what they are exposed to. So mirroring the violence that they are seeing, perhaps sometimes domestic violence, altercations at home, outside, within the neighborhood, but also beyond it, within the school culture. We see, smacking, pushing, shoving, and exerting aggression seems to be the way out. So do parents actually have the time to engage and talk to children on a daily basis? It's basically they're touching, or, it's the periphery, they're scratching the periphery. They don't actually engage with children around their unmet needs, the unresolved conflicts or problems that children are faced with. So I think something that Anele spoke about in your question, I would like to just labor on that. The children, how does a child actually hold a gun? This gun was not held for the first time. I can assure you that the weight of the gun as well certainly gave a sense of power and control to the child, but it's also socialization. What has the child been exposed to? So this becomes a normal or this norm in the child's life, this infatuation with violence. And do children actually speak to that with their parents? Do parents actually speak to that with children? Children see television, and if we look at everything out there, it's projecting violence. And this infatuation, it becomes synonymous with feeling stronger, with feeling more adequate, with recognizing that I'm okay, that nobody's going to harm me. This fear of other people is certainly, overcome by knowing that I have a security weapon, or this is my shield, it's going to protect me. So I just want to say that we realize the reality is that parents do not always have there are opportunities, but they don't always have the insight or the ability to actually reach out to see that their child is troubled, or what their child has been exposed to is certainly impacting on the well-being of the child.
I mean, if you can't see your child enough, and I think that's I've never met a parent who says I want to spend less time with my children. Never met that person. But if you don't spend enough time with them, if you know that you aren't able to, are there certain things you can do? Can you have a special time? Can you try and create a situation where your child can tell you what's happening in their lives? I mean, are there mechanisms or things that you can do to try and improve, make sure that you understand what's happening in your child's life?
Absolutely, Stephen. I think there are lots of opportunities. It's just putting one's mind to it as a parent, using those opportunistic moments, making it a routine, whether it's during breakfast time, fetching the child from school, having dinner, homework time. But there are always opportunities, and creating a daily routine. The message that is conveyed to the child that he or she is important, that they as a family have values, and that they are recognized. Each one is recognized for their value and for their importance and the significance. And I think there are many opportunities that parents can create. It doesn't have to be a lengthy session where now I've got to spend time, an hour, certainly not. But it's just catching up on the child's day, what happened, what were the happy moments, what were the triggers that made the child unhappy, what could the child do differently. It's basic questions, understanding, but also reaching out, but also feeling that as a parent, I am actually able to understand and appreciate what my child is experiencing.
This obviously goes from one generation to the next, right? I mean, if one generation doesn't get to spend enough time with their children, the next generation probably won't do that. Children learn how to parent from their parents.
Indeed, and I think this is something that when we speak about programs, as we are currently working with schools about positive parenting, about disciplining, it's about reaching out to parents who actually don't know how to parent, who haven't been parented themselves and are clueless. And I think that when you talk about that intergenerational pattern, the ripple effect it has, because I was socialized in that manner, obviously, as a parent, I don't know any better. And this is how I deal with the situation. So once again, we need to focus on parenting skills, because children are not born with manuals, and parents don't always have all the answers. I think there are lots of questions that they're not able to address immediately, but there are opportunities, and having these kind of programs to assist parents would certainly be very positive and beneficial both to the parent and the child. But I also want to speak to the fact, that we are faced with so many learners, and if we look at the dynamics, the multifaceted influences, the risk factors. Children, where do they have access? Mostly to guns. It's at home, the place where they're supposed to be safe. And if we look at safeguarding, and of course there are many concerns here around how the child had access without being detected, but also engaging the premeditation. This is not an isolated random incident. The fact that it was thought out, it was actually orchestrated, there was engagement. So we need to look at so many risk factors here that and you asked, Anela, a very important question about identifying warning signs. It's not always visible to the naked eye. A conduct disorder is easier to pick up, but a child that is sitting with latent anger and rage is not always easily identifiable. So one needs to look at the importance of getting life orientation or life skills, but parents, and of course looking on different levels on how we can prevent these kind of outrageous, heinous crimes, that children start normalizing this kind of conduct. They start believing that this is the only way out for them.
Dr. Shahida Omar, thank you, Director of the Teddy Bear Foundation. In a moment, the digital parenting expert, Sarah Hoffman.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still a bit of traffic on N1, Mid-Rand section between Old Joburg Road and New Road. Looks like just a volume of traffic heading that way. Some heavy delays into Sandton. A crash on Winnie Mandela before Sandton Drive. There's also some issues on Sandton Drive at Parkmore, but it's that crash that's causing big delays in from Bryanston High School. Also Peter Place out of Bryanston and Republic Road out of Randburg. Heavy into the traffic on Winnie Mandela. Grayston Drive coming up towards the Mike 1 Highway from the Bramley-Weinberg side. Very slow. Expect some delays going in and out of Germiston on the M2. Standstill traffic both ways between Heldenays interchange and the Refinery Road exit. Durban's M7's been another busy one this morning down towards the Bel Air and Wakesley Road junction. I'm glad to report all of that's being cleared up. Taxi crash on Umgeda Road inbound near the stadium. Expect some delays there. A breakdown on the N2 North after Spaghetti Junction through the roadwork. So that traffic heading north up from the Boothrow Bridge area towards Umgeda Road remains slow. Cape Town, the N7 from Goodwood through to Bosmansdam still busy, and both the Kuberg Road and Marine Drive options through sort of Pardon Island, Brooklyn area. Very slow getting into a busy N1. And don't forget there are closures around City Hall that are already in place this morning for today's budget speech event. So routes like Darling and parts of Hanover Street coming into Darling Street, Corporation Street, those routes remaining closed across the day. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Masandawana had full control in front of their home fans against FC Nouadhibou, and they want to triumph again to stay on the summit of Group A. Meanwhile, the Mauritanian outfit says not in their own backyard. This is the CAF Champions League. The Orange Club battles it out with Kabuyelo. Witness Africa's beautiful game, FC Nwadibu versus Mamelodi Sundowns, the Saturday 24 February at 5:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag we love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The Free State Provincial Government, under the leadership of Premier Mxolisi Dukwana, will host the much-anticipated Free State Investment Conference. The conference seeks to promote the province as an investment destination through showcasing strategic investment projects. Do join us on the 27th of February 2024 at the University of the Free State's main campus in Bloemfontein. The Free State Provincial Government, harnessing partnerships, stimulating growth and development through investment.
Attention listeners, do you know a young visionary making a difference in South Africa? Sunday World is searching for unsung heroes, from community leaders to tech innovators who are looking for the young minds driving positive change. Nominate someone who's making waves in education, science, tourism, or any field. Let's recognise and celebrate their contributions together. Nominate your unsung hero now, because every hero deserves their moment in the spotlight. Hashtag unsung heroes, hashtag nominate now, hashtag Sunday World, sundayworld.co.za/heroes-nominations-2024.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Continue your mediated conversation, the aftermath of this incident in which a 13-year-old boy planned on a WhatsApp group the shooting of his school principal. Sarah Hoffman's a digital parenting expert, a social media lawyer, and co-founder of Clicked. Sarah, good morning.
Morning, Stephen. Lovely to be back on your show, albeit a little bit of a somber topic.
Yeah. I mean, one of the amazing things about this is that the children, primary school children, were planning this on a WhatsApp group. As parents, should we be looking at children's WhatsApps to see what they're doing on their phones?
Stephen, absolutely yes. I can't tell you how often we at Clicked get asked this question, and the answer, in my opinion, is pretty simple. So if you know, invading my privacy, and our response is quite simple, that if you want privacy, you're welcome to use a diary, a journal, something else, but you cannot expect privacy on a permanent international public platform, which is, most social media platforms. So, I think there's the issue of privacy, and then there's also the issue of the fact that these platforms are not designed for our children. They're absolutely not child-friendly. Our children do not have the emotional skills to manage things that come. The case you're talking about today is a very extreme example. But for, the average family whose child is on a WhatsApp group, they are still dealing with things like group dynamics and blocking and exclusion and bullying and nastiness and nasty memes. And children don't have the skills to manage those. They need to learn those skills. And in the process of learning, if your child is on one of those platforms, a parent needs to check in and see what's happening, because I would expect our children to be let loose on these devices that are simply not designed for children, and not make silly mistakes, not mess up. And also, in the example you speaking about this morning, perhaps if more parents had checked that group, a different outcome could have, the very tragic outcome could have been prevented.
Sarah, I'm just going to ask you to move around a bit to strengthen the reception on your cell phone. I presume you must tell your child that you're looking at their WhatsApp messages. They must know that you're doing this.
Yes. Stephen, is the signal better now?
A little better, yeah.
Okay, great. Just let me know if you can't hear me. Yeah, so absolutely. I think when you're giving your child a device and you've made the decision that you feel your child is ready to be in the online world, we always recommend at Clicked that you make some rules and boundaries around how that device is used, where it's used, when it's used. And one of those rules should be that I will check your device from time to time, or whatever regularity the parent feels is appropriate. We've got a lovely resource on our website, www.click.co.za, KLIKT, which is actually a contract that parents can sign with their children. It's a reciprocal contract that says these are the rules that you're going to use the device for, and it's reciprocal in that the parents will also undertake to do things like, I won't post embarrassing photos of you on social media, etc. So we always recommend that there's open communication around these issues.
At what age do you stop looking at their cell phones? Stop looking at their WhatsApps?
I think there's no blanket age, Stephen, and every child is different. But I think the answer is when you are comfortable and confident that your child has the emotional toolkit to manage the various dynamics that are happening on those groups. And that might be younger for some children and might be older for others. But one can only really know that through checking. And, obviously the checking in the beginning would be more frequent. And as you feel more comfortable that your child can manage and will come to you when there's an issue, then the frequency can decrease.
Children often know their cell phones better than their parents on a technical basis. I mean, they will use disappearing messages and things like that. If your child's doing that, do you need to sort of start worrying?
I think so. And I think that's where, again, the importance of open communication comes in. So, a parent would say, I see there's a disappearing message. There's something you wanted to tell me. But I think what we need to shift as parents is this mindset of judging and condescending and fear-mongering around the conversations around our children's digital lives.
Sarah, are you still there? Sarah Hoffman? Hello? Hi. Not sure what's happened there. There's certainly someone on the line, but that seems to have disappeared. Sarah Hoffman, I don't know if you're still with us.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Sorry, that was very...
Sorry.
Okay, no. There are other things that people do on that young people do on their phone. I mean, TikTok and things like that, other messages, other apps that could be harmful. Do you need to sort of keep a close eye on what apps your child can access? And the problem is that you can sort of monitor their phone, but you can't monitor their friend's phone, and they can still look at that.
Absolutely. So the unfortunate answer is yes. And your previous speaker was speaking about how overstretched parents are, and how exhausted we are. And managing our child's digital world is an incredibly overwhelming task for parents because, A, our children, we don't really understand the technology, and B, it's so dynamic, it's changing all the time. But the short answer to your question is yes, we do need to keep on top of what our children are doing. There are sophisticated softwares we can access that will tell us what our children are doing online, but really the most important thing is constantly checking in and constant lines of communication, because that is really going to be the greatest offset against any of these many online risks that our children are going to come up against.
Sarah Hoffman, thank you. Digital parenting expert, social media lawyer, and co-founder of Click. Really appreciate the time. My thanks also to Dr. Shahida Omar, director of the Teddy Bear Foundation, starting us off today, the clinical psychologist Anela Siswana. I hope it helps in some ways. I know, very difficult. One of the biggest questions, of course, is how to parent. It's very difficult. All right, lots to come. Kathy is next. The budget from 2 o'clock this afternoon. From Mdu, Melissa, and Porp, Stuns and myself, look after yourself. You're with SFM leading the conversation. It's 9 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, another legal blow for Jacob Zuma, and the EFF welcomes confirmation of election date. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. The former President Jacob Zuma